Chapter 1683, Attack. Become the Captain. 1. The corners of Zhou 12's mouth twitched when he saw this scene. He finally knew what clone Zhou 11's clone was. Zhang Yang's character duplicate, or rather, his arrogant character duplicate. Only such a clone could do such a brainless thing. However, it had to be said that while such a move was brainless, the effect was quite obvious. He could clearly see that many of the god spirits present, especially God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, were clearly a little warm. However, the other gods, other than the God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, didn't do anything drastic. They had already seen that there were many supreme gods and master god tiers behind Zhou 11 after all. Soki and Hank, coupled with the two quasi-supreme willpower experts, were the one who would gain the upper hand in a fight between, they might not necessarily be the one. Therefore, they looked at God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. As the leader of the Holy Scale treasure hunting team, his duty was to stand up for them in times of crisis, in addition to taking the lead in treasure hunting. Otherwise, who would recognize him as their captain? Sure enough, the God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon stood out with a dark expression. What do you mean? Zhou 11 grinned. He scratched his ears and said arrogantly, "Are you deaf from what this emperor just said? This emperor never repeats what he said. Since you're deaf, this emperor will beat you until you understand." Zhou 11 swung his sword. An extremely terrifying nine-colored sword energy burst forth and enveloped God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's expression changed. He felt a fatal sense of danger above this terrifying nine-colored sword aura. He had not felt such a feeling for a long time as a top-notch quasi-supreme willpower expert. He felt it in front of those supreme will realm cultivators, and the few times he felt it. Could this fellow in front of him be a supreme will realm expert? No. Impossible. How could a true supreme willpower realm expert say so much nonsense to him? There was no time to think. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon immediately activated his divine power. A gray scale appeared between his brows. A primordial aura filled the entire space as soon as the gray scale appeared. When the gods and spirits saw God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon use this move, they were all shocked. This was because they knew that this was God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's strongest trump card. He would only use this move when he encountered an evenly matched or irresistible enemy. Unexpectedly, this unfamiliar supreme god actually forced God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon to use his ultimate move as soon as he attacked. Unbelievable. At this moment, the gray scale immediately emitted a gray pillar of light that pounced at Zhou 11. Attack what he needed to save. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon knew that there was a high chance that he would not be able to block this sword aura, so he chose not to block it and directly attacked the owner of the sword aura. According to his expectations, this fellow who called himself this emperor would definitely withdraw his power to protect himself and dissipate the incoming sword aura. At that time, his danger would naturally be resolved. However, Zhou 11 calmly looked at the incoming gray light pillar and did not move at all. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon felt a sense of doubt and urgency seeing that the gray pillar of light was getting closer and closer to Zhou 11. Why didn't this guy dodge? Could he have felt that he could withstand his nomological skills? His nomological skills carried the power of corruption and corrosion. Once it was contaminated by this power, it would quickly decay and corrode the divine spark and divine body of the person who was contaminated. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult to remove. Could he not tell? There was no time to think because the sword light that Zhou 11 shot out was already right in front of him. Furthermore, he did not retract the power on the sword light and let it disintegrate on its own. This left he with no choice but to dodge first. However, he quickly discovered something. He couldn't escape. The sword beam seemed to have locked onto him. No matter how he flew, teleported, or used other dodging methods, the sword beam seemed to be fixed in front of him as it advanced at a stable and terrifying speed. At this last moment, realizing that he could not dodge the attack, God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon could only activate all his divine power and defensive methods. He did not even hesitate to activate the origin divine power in his divine spark to block this attack. The next second, this 9-colored sword light seemed to be unaffected by all techniques. It broke through all the defensive methods that God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon had released with all his might and pierced into his glabella. Crack, crack, crack. At this moment, the gods seemed to have heard the sound of something shattering. When they saw God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon again, they saw that God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon, who had always been strong, was already stunned on the spot. Then, the aura on his body quickly dissipated. In less than a few seconds, the aura on his body completely disappeared. Finally, he fell to the ground with a bang. He stared at Zhou 11. It was as if he wanted to see how Zhou 11 would deal with his attack even if he died. He soon saw it. When the gray pillar of light released by him was a meter away from Zhou 11, it suddenly stopped in the air as if time had stopped. Chapter 1684, Attack. Become the Captain. 2. Then, the gray pillar of light automatically disintegrated into countless gray weapons and disappeared before the eyes of the deities. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's eyes widened slightly. Then, he discovered something that made he despair. He could not understand. He couldn't understand how the other party had eliminated his full-strength attack. The God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon was completely dead with this sense of despair and doubt. Silence. The entire Sacred Scale Treasure Hunting Team's resting area fell silent. They stared wide-eyed at God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon's corpse. They never expected that their captain would die so quickly in his hands. This was a top-notch quasi-supreme willpower realm expert. He could be considered an expert even among the quasi-supreme will realm experts. Otherwise, he wouldn't have surpassed the other 3 quasi-supreme willpower experts to become the team leader and even use the Holy Scale as the team's name. He relied on his invincible strength. However, this invincible strength actually seemed so weak in front of the expert called His Majesty. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon had died with just 1 strike, while he was safe and sound, as if nothing had happened. What kind of terrifying strength was this? Even the top supreme willpower realm powerhouses probably did not have such strength, right? It was likely that even people would believe that he was a true supreme willpower realm expert with such means and suppression. This captain of yours seems pathetically weak. Zhou 11 grinned. His arrogant and domineering aura was revealed as he said this. None of the gods present said a word. They, who believed that the strong were respected, had completely conquered, when Zhou 11 easily killed God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. They did not even have any dissatisfaction in their hearts. Powerful. Especially his unquestionable strength. It was a super trait that could completely subdue enemies and opponents. And they was undoubtedly convinced by this trait. Zhou 11 looked at Soki. Soki immediately understood and stood up. He raised his head proudly. Do you know how powerful His Majesty is? From now on, His Majesty will be the leader of this Sacred Scale Treasure Hunting Team. Your Majesty, what name do you have in mind? Soki suddenly turned to ask Zhou 11. Zhou 11 didn't expect to encounter such a small problem of naming. However, he had to change the name. He thought about it and casually said, let's call it the Chaos Treasure Hunting Team. He had the Chaos human bloodline and was stepping on the corpse of a chaotic divine demon. It was reasonable for him to form a Chaos Treasure Hunting Team. Okay. Hearing this, Soki immediately turned to these supreme gods and another quasi-supreme willpower realm expert and raised his head. From now on, our treasure hunting team will be called the Chaos Treasure Hunting Team. Why don't you greet your new captain and future king? Greetings, Your Majesty. X-13 The god spirits looked at each other and quickly accepted the reality. They immediately said in unison. They did not look disappointed after accepting the change in their identities. Instead, they looked excited. They were very direct in their thinking as top-notch experts. If you're strong and can bring us more benefits, we'll follow you. If you're weak, then get the hell out of here. The powerhouse they had previously acknowledged was God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. And now, the king that they acknowledged was clearly stronger than God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. If nothing went wrong, he would naturally bring they more benefits. Therefore, they was naturally filled with anticipation for the future. When Zhou 11 saw that he had achieved the effect of establishing his dominance, he no longer maintained his arrogant and despotic face. Instead, he smiled faintly. Since everyone has acknowledged me as their captain, this emperor naturally won't mistreat you. Take this as a small greeting gift. I hope that we can work together in the future and obtain more wealth from Tian Jun's corpse. After saying that, Zhou 11 waved his right hand and a total of 15 world rings flew in front of the god spirits present. When one of the god spirits opened it, they were immediately shocked and delighted to discover that the world rings in front of they contained a total of 10,000 grade 1 supreme god divine crystals. Thank you, Your Majesty. The 15 supreme gods were pleasantly surprised and respectful. And among them, Soki and Hank's voices were especially loyal and loud. This was because they discovered that even though there were also 10,000 supreme god divine crystals in their world rings, they were not grade 1 supreme god divine crystals, but grade 2 supreme god divine crystals. If converted into grade 1 supreme god divine crystals, it would be a total of 100,000 grade 1 supreme god divine crystals. These 10,000 grade 2 supreme god divine crystals were enough for them to experience many life and death crises. How could they not be surprised? His Majesty was really a generous expert. All the supreme gods present had the same thought. Zhou 11 smiled faintly and nodded. Now that the effect of establishing his might have been achieved, the next step was naturally the reward segment. There were benefits to having dignity. Only then could his subordinates properly work for him. He naturally understood such matters. Next, it was time to make a request. Thinking of this, he slowly said, "This emperor only needs one treasure this time. That's the Chaos Divine Treasure, which is what you call the True Blood Divine Stone. In the following exploration, you need to find enough True Blood Divine Stones for me. For every unit of True Blood Divine Stone, this emperor can spend 100 units of Grade 1 Supreme God Crystals to purchase it. This emperor will buy however many you have. This emperor doesn't need any other treasures you've collected during this process other than the True Blood Divine Stone. You can keep them for yourselves." All the supreme gods, including the quasi-supreme willpower practitioner, widened their eyes and looked at Zhou 11 as if they were confirming whether Zhou 11 was telling the truth as soon as he said. Even Soki and Hank could not help but look at Zhou 11. "Your Majesty, is what you say true?" A grade 4 supreme god could not help but ask. The other supreme gods also looked at Zhou 11, longing for his answer. "This emperor is a man of his word," Zhou 11 said in a deep voice. He didn't care about other treasures. He and Zhou Shir's goal for this trip was very clear. It was to obtain the Chaos Divine Treasure. Other than the Chaos Divine Treasure, the other treasures were not important to them. They would get it if they could. If they couldn't get Zhou 11, they wouldn't feel that it was a pity. After all, with the various lord talents of the main body, there was bound to be no shortage of treasures in the future. Therefore, Zhou 11 and Zhou Shire would not be bewitched by so many treasures here. They would only focus on the chaos divine treasure. When the gods heard this, they immediately became excited. The candidate for the captain position, as a powerhouse who protected them, usually needed to share the treasures they had obtained during their treasure exploration. The distribution ratio was as low as 20% and as high as 50%. For example, God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. When he was the captain, he required his team members to hand over 40% of the treasures. This was already an extremely high percentage. However, in the end, the gods accepted the ratio. The reason was simple. That was, they needed the protection of God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. And God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon did indeed have enough strength to protect they in Tian Jun's corpse to survive and search for treasures. Even though this percentage was very high, they still chose to grit their teeth and accept it because of these two reasons. They originally thought that with Zhou 11 becoming the new captain of the Chaos Treasure Hunting Team, he would definitely ask for a higher percentage of the profits. It might even reach 50%. Zhou 11 was much stronger than God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon after all. It was not surprising for such an expert to ask for a higher price. Some treasure hunting teams might even take the initiative to offer a higher percentage of the profits to keep such a powerhouse to protect them in order to obtain the protection of such a powerhouse. However, they never expected that the new captain in front of them would not want any benefits other than the most worthless and unwanted true blood divine stone. If this isn't a surprise, what is it? This is like a pie falling from the sky. They now felt like they had been hit by a pie. Chapter 1685, Collecting Treasures. Demon of Chaos. 1. Zhou 11 leisurely said while the gods were still in shock, in the future, when you search for true blood divine stones, you can rope in other lone god spirits or god spirits with small teams to come to us and collect true blood divine stones for this emperor. Their treatment is the same. As long as I can speed up the collection of the true blood divine stones, this emperor will definitely not be stingy with the rewards. Supreme divine artifacts, divine crystals, secret techniques, inheritance, this emperor has everything. As for the consequences, as long as you don't provoke a supreme will realm expert, experts below the supreme will realm are all ants to this emperor. So feel free to do whatever you want. Yes, your majesty. All the supreme gods agreed. They were all aware of His Majesty's strength, so they naturally knew that His Majesty was telling the truth. With His Majesty's strength, he could indeed act almost unscrupulously among experts below the Supreme Will realm. With His Majesty as their backer, they could indeed do things for His Majesty without worrying too much. Zhou 11 nodded and said, "Go. Come back and tell this emperor if you encounter any irresistible trouble. This emperor will naturally send experts to help you resolve the trouble. But remember, don't come to this emperor for every small matter. This emperor doesn't have much patience." He said lightly. "At your command, sire." The supreme god's hearts trembled. They glanced at God Lord Yulong's corpse, which had yet to lose its temperature, and could not help but feel a sense of fear. His Majesty was indeed impatient. God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon was a top-notch quasi-supreme willpower practitioner, but he was still beaten to death by His Majesty. He did not even have the time to beg for mercy. They made up their minds thinking of this. Even if they had the backing of a top-notch expert like His Majesty, they would not casually stir up trouble and get themselves into trouble. Otherwise, when the time comes, if he did not obtain any benefits, he might end up like God Lord Holy Scale Spirit Dragon. This was a huge opportunity. He could not afford to screw it up because of a moment of foolishness and arrogance. Following that, they did not waste any time and immediately left the resting area to search for the true blood divine stone. Now, to they, time was the true blood divine stone. The true blood divine stone represented more supreme God crystals, and more supreme God crystals meant that they could experience more life and death battles in the land of the heavenly handsome zombie god spirits and obtain more treasures. They did not want to waste their time resting. After they left, Zhou 11 turned to look at Zhou 12 with a smug expression. "What do you think? I did a good job, didn't I?" "So. However, Zhou 12's expression was very calm. "Next, let's do what we should do." Zhou 11 nodded. They looked at each other and saw the passion in each other's eyes. Now, the task of collecting the Chaos Divine Treasures had been arranged. Then, they could use the Lord Talent of the King of Treasures to focus on collecting the treasures hidden in Tian Jun's corpse. They didn't expect it either. Originally, they had planned to collect the Chaos Divine Treasures themselves. They were doing it instead. However, plans can't keep up with changes. Zhou 11 and them did not care. As long as he could gather enough Chaos Divine Treasures, it would be fine. Comparatively, the current job was more interesting. Then let's go. At Zhou 11's command, he left with the entire Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom Supreme Gods, Master God Tiers, and Soki and Hank, who he had just subdued, to search for treasures. Soon, they arrived at the location of the first treasure spot. This was the location of a godless passage. Zhou 11 and they could clearly see that there were many traces of mining here. However, it seemed that it was because of the excessive mining that this place was considered a barren land without any treasures. As a result, it was neglected until now. But Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 relied on the King of Treasures' senses to confirm that there were indeed treasures here. And there was more than one. Right there. Zhou 11 pointed at a wall and said to the gods behind him, "Start digging deeper with the point this emperor pointed at." "Yes, your majesty." All the supreme gods and master god tiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom immediately responded and immediately began to dig. All the supreme gods and master god tiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom immediately responded and immediately began to dig. This was the place where Tian Jun's corpse was after all. Ordinary pickaxes, even those with extraordinary power, could not damage this place at all. Only the willpower of a master god tier level had the right to destroy the walls here. Only the willpower of a supreme god could quickly destroy the wall and obtain the treasures inside. As for the supreme will realm, they could already go deep into the head of Tian Jun's corpse and search for the most important treasures and inheritance of Tian Jun's corpse. While Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 envied the top experts for being able to find the most precious treasures and legacies, they wouldn't care too much about these things. Doing what they could do was what they should do now. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 knew this very well. Next, the Master God tiers and Supreme Gods all used their law skills to attack the wall in front of them. It's called a wall. However, it was actually the body of Tian Jun's willpower. Chapter 1686, Collecting Treasures. Demon of Chaos. 2. After he died, even though his body of will had become much weaker, it was not something that ordinary god spirits could break. The Master God tiers and Supreme Gods tried their best to throw their law skills at the wall, but they only destroyed a small portion. When they saw this, they couldn't help but sigh at the powerhouses with strong willpower. It had been so many years since the death of this powerhouse. Logically speaking, his body strength should have dissipated by now. It would only be normal if his body strength had greatly decreased. However, even if it was a huge drop, it was not something that the gods and spirits could break easily. This was something that they did not expect. And among the gods, Soki and Hank, who had just joined, looked at each other in confusion. They did not know about this place either. It was just an abandoned passageway that had been plundered and mined countless times. There was definitely no treasure left. Why did His Majesty spend so much effort in this place? They was puzzled, but they did not dare to ask further. At the same time, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 were not in a hurry when they saw how inefficient it was. However, they did not stay idle. Instead, they joined and attacked the wall together. With the addition of Zhou 11 and Zhou 12, two top-notch quasi-supreme willpower experts, the efficiency of the gods' attack had clearly increased. In less than 15 minutes, the wall in front of them had been penetrated more than 10 meters deep by them. At this moment, more than 10 beams of light suddenly appeared in the deepest part of the passageway, illuminating the entire passageway. The eyes of the blazing sun divine kingdom's gods lit up, but that was all. They were all veterans of the blazing sun divine kingdom. They had seen countless treasures, so they naturally wouldn't have much of a reaction to the treasure light. However, Soki and Hank widened their eyes. There was actually a treasure in this abandoned passageway. And there was more than one. At the thought of this, when they looked at Zhou 11 again, they immediately felt that the king they followed had become even more mysterious. His Majesty really has an unbelievable ability that they doesn't understand. Take it out. Zhou 11's reaction was normal as he said calmly. A supreme god of the blazing sun divine kingdom immediately jumped into the passageway and took out all the treasures inside, presenting them to Zhou 11 and Zhou 12. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 looked over. A total of 11 treasures floated quietly in front of they, each of them emitting energy fluctuations at the level of a grade 4 supreme god. Among them, there were supreme divine artifacts, divine medicines, minerals, grade 4 supreme god-level nomological inheritances, book of the god spirit, and so on. To think that so many different kinds of treasures could be nurtured in the body of a willpower practitioner. The will of such an expert is truly mystical. Zhou 11 sighed. Transcendence of will. That was a truly unimaginable cultivation realm. Laws. Willpower. These two concepts could not restrain such an expert. They were existences that truly surpassed all cultivation systems. It was also because of this. Only those with strong willpower could do whatever they wanted in the ultimate void cosmos without worrying about encountering any danger. Because no matter which cultivation system it was, no one could restrict such an expert. They were still cultivating in the system, while the strong-willed ones had truly transcended everything and were no longer bound by any cultivation system. Therefore, the creatures of the ultimate void universe had a very appropriate description for these experts. Lawless, it showed how powerful and terrifying a willpower-strong practitioner was to be able to use the word lawless to describe a willpower-strong practitioner, and this description was recognized by the various universes in the ultimate void great cosmos. Zhou 11 did not think too much about it. He took a look and put these treasures into the number 1 treasure vault. Happy. He must be happy. These were all grade 4 supreme god treasures after all. There were not many supreme god treasures of this level even in his first treasure vault. However, it was not to the extent that he couldn't be happy. The only treasures that could make Zhou and his clones excited were supreme willpower treasures, and even eternal immortal realm treasures. There was a high chance that these treasures existed in Tian Jun's corpse. Zhou 11 naturally did not expect to obtain that treasure that might be at the eternal immortal realm. However, Zhou 11 felt that with the help of the King of Treasures, he and Zhou 12 should be able to obtain a few supreme treasures and treasures. When the time came, the main Bodhi's ability to protect itself must be even stronger. Go on. Zhou 11 did not stop and continued to follow the King of Treasures' directions to the next treasure location. Soon, they came to the next treasure hunting spot. Zhou 11 looked at the chaotic divine demon that was emitting the aura of a rank 4 supreme god and was elated. There are still living chaotic divine demons here. But he doesn't seem to be in a good state. Zhou 11 looked at him carefully. Judging from the bloodline aura emanating from the other party's body, he was undoubtedly a chaotic divine demon. Judging from the bloodline aura emanating from the other party's body, he was undoubtedly a chaotic divine demon. The next moment, the chaotic divine demon pounced at Zhou 11. When Zhou 11 saw this scene, there was only one thought left in his mind. This guy is crazy. No matter how strong this guy was, he was only a grade 4 supreme god. How did he have the guts to charge at they and the other supreme gods and master god tiers? On the surface, they had two quasi-supreme willpower experts. There was no need for Zhou 11 to do anything. Hank took the initiative to step forward. Law skills belonging to the law of strength erupted, and a circle destroyed this guy's head. Even the divine spark inside was shattered into pieces. Zhou 11 raised his hand and retrieved the other party's spoils of war. Soon, a large number of spoils of war appeared in his first treasure vault, and the chaotic divine demon's corpse in front of his disappeared without a trace. Zhou 11 looked at the loots, ignored the other treasures, and directly landed on the chaos divine treasure. Then, his face lit up. This was because he saw that this chaos divine demon, a 4th grade supreme god, had actually dropped a total of 200 chaos divine treasures under the enhancement of his Lord talent and various titles. Great! It was a good start. Zhou 11 was elated. Zhou 12 could sense Zhou 11's thoughts and a smile appeared on his face. He had not obtained many treasures, but he had already obtained 200 units of chaos divine treasures. What a pleasant surprise. In addition, this fellow was indeed worthy of being a grade 4 supreme god chaos divine treasure. The chaos divine treasure that dropped was actually 50 times more valuable than the chaos divine demon that was master god tier advanced grade. It was the right place to come. They even had a feeling. They could collect all the chaos divine treasures that were enough to upgrade their territory with just Tianjun's corpse. In fact, the excess chaos divine treasures could be used to nurture other lord factions to advance to the master god tier kingdom and help him meet the advancement conditions to advance to the lord faction of the high-level master god tier kingdom. I didn't expect to meet a demon of chaos. Right at that moment, Soki said in surprise. Demon of chaos? What's that? Zhou 11 asked. Wasn't he a chaotic divine demon? Your Majesty, Soki said respectfully. The so-called chaos demons are the demonic creatures controlled by the true blood divine stone after some normal god spirits forcibly devoured and refined the true blood divine stone in Tianjun's corpse. They lost their will because they couldn't resist the invasion of the true blood divine stone. Because its body has also been transformed into a chaotic divine demon, we call it the chaotic demon. These demons of chaos are distributed among Tianjun's corpse, and most of them appear and disappear unpredictably. I didn't expect to encounter such a monster so quickly. Zhou 11 raised his eyebrows. Since the true blood divine stone has such a huge problem, why did it give birth to so many chaotic demons? Could it be that a god spirit forcefully created chaotic demons? Not really. Soki sighed and said, it's just that there's indeed a 1% chance that a god spirit can resist the invasion of the power in the true blood divine stone and thus refine the true blood divine stone, increasing their strength greatly. The other god spirits couldn't resist the temptation and tried to take the initiative to refine it. In the end, most of them became chaotic demons. Everyone thinks they're the god of destiny protected by great fortune. In the end, most of them became the walking dead. It's pathetic. New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1687, The Battle Begins. 1. I see. Zhou 11 understood. That's true. That was a true blood divine stone left behind after the death of a strong willpower practitioner after all. Other than strong willpower practitioners and stronger practitioners, most god spirits would probably not be able to resist this temptation. Even an expert at the supreme will realm would not be an exception. Compared to weaker gods, supreme willpower powerhouses might even desire the power of willpower more after all. As for the risk was nothing to those experts who yearn for strength compared to the benefits of obtaining strength. Zhou 11 had seen too many examples of people taking risks for the sake of power. Therefore, he wasn't surprised at all. Moreover, it was just as Soki said. Many god spirits, especially those who had reached the level of master god tier or even supreme god, believed that they had great luck. In fact, it was without great luck, who could rely on their own hard work to reach the level of master god tier and supreme god step by step. Maybe there were, but very few of them. And if they felt that they had great providence, it was very likely that they would feel that they would be the lucky one in 100. However, reality was often cruel. Creatures who believed themselves to be the lucky ones would often not be blessed by him. Luck mostly favored those who were prepared. As a result, a large number of chaos demons appeared in Tianjun's corpse. This group of pitiful experts who firmly believed in heaven's will but were toyed with by it. Zhou 11 believed that his main body was also an expert blessed with great luck. However, he was unwilling to take the risk of absorbing the true blood divine stone. This was the true blood left behind by a willpower existence. How careless was he to absorb such a thing without investigating anything? Who knew how many tricks there were in this thing? Even if the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord came together, they might not be able to see through the techniques of a willpower expert, let alone a little army like his. He should just treat this thing as a material for upgrading his territory. As for other uses, he should keep a respectful distance. In any case, he was not in a hurry to increase his strength. There was no need to take the risk of using such a hidden danger. Come on. Continue searching for treasures. Zhou 11 did not think much of it and continued to search for treasures. The rest of the journey, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 had obtained many grade 4 supreme god level treasures. As for treasures below or above grade 3 supreme god level, they had yet to discover them. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 could not help but sigh. Tianjun was indeed a strong willpower practitioner. Even though he had been dead for such a long time, he was still so generous. He was even unwilling to condense a treasure below the level of a grade 4 supreme god. On the way to the treasure hunt, they also encountered 3 to 4 chaotic divine demons. Just as Soki had said, they were indeed distributed among Tianjun's corpse. They rarely gathered together, and most of them wandered alone. Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 naturally had nothing to say in the face of such moving chaos divine treasures. They directly destroyed them and extracted the chaos divine treasures in the other party's body. In less than half a day, they had collected more than 1,000 units of chaos divine treasures. This made Zhou 11 and Zhou 12's exclamation worthwhile. They did not care much about the grade 4 supreme god level treasures. At the same time, at the ultimate void battlefield. In the Demon Lord Sanctuary, the Lord of 10,000 Evils and his 1,000 Evils army were standing respectfully behind a figure that emitted boundless holy light. This figure was none other than the Supreme Will. Lord Supreme Will, may I ask when we leave? The Lord of 10,000 Evils said respectfully. Let's wait a little longer. The Void Emperor is also gathering his forces. It will be the time for a head-on battle when they are assembled. The Supreme will remind it. Yes, my lord. The Lord of 10,000 Evils nodded calmly. At their level, any schemes were useless. It was fine if both sides did not fight, but if they fought, it would be a battle of absolute strength. So the Supreme will didn't mind waiting a little longer. The Lord of 10,000 Evils also understood this, so he didn't feel that something was wrong. However, after some hesitation, he couldn't help but ask, "Is Lord Crimson Overlord not coming?" However, after some hesitation, he couldn't help but ask, "Is Lord Crimson Overlord not coming?" "But you don't have to worry. It's just a Void Emperor. I can handle it," the Supreme Will said. His tone was very natural and calm, as if it was a matter of course. "I've never been worried about such things. It's just that I want to ask you for a favor, Your Excellency. I hope the Supreme Will approve." The Lord of 10,000 Evils said respectfully. "Oh." The Supreme Will looked at the Lord of 10,000 Evils with a faint smile and nodded. "All right, you have contributed to the ultimate void battlefield, so I should reward you. Tell me, what are your requests?" "After His Majesty defeats the Void Emperor, I would like to search the sanctuary for the ultimate void crystal and chaos divine treasure," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said. "Ultimate void crystal and chaos divine treasure. Are you upgrading your territory, too? New chapter is coming soon, write a review." Chapter 1688, The Battle Begins. 2. But didn't you stop running your territory a long time ago and specialize in law cultivation? What? Do you have other thoughts seeing the common people's regal strength increase so quickly too? The Supreme Will was a little surprised. Then, he smiled and said, "I asked for it for your sake. Brother Common People's Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom needs to be promoted to a high-level Divine Kingdom Lord faction. Currently, it lacks Chaos Divine Treasures and Ultimate Void Crystals. Therefore, I mustered my courage and asked for these two things from you," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said honestly. He knew that he could not lie in front of the Supreme Will, so he could only tell the truth. He felt that since the Supreme Will valued his elder brother so much, he probably wouldn't mind such a small matter. "I didn't expect you to have such a deep friendship with the common people's regal. In that case, you can take it when the time comes. These things don't work for me anyway," the Supreme Will said casually. He felt somewhat gratified. He was naturally very happy to see that two of the four successors, he approved of having such a mutually beneficial friendship. Before the common people's regal, the God King Heaven Punishment, the Lord of 10,000 Evils, and the Lord of 10,000 Evils had always regarded each other as competitors. They had never formed any friendship and would have a mutual appreciation between competitors at best. Even though the Supreme Will was happy to see such a scene, he actually felt a little uncomfortable when they were competing with each other for the position of Supreme Lord. However, this was the way to compete for the Supreme Lord position. The victor was a noble, and the loser was a bandit. This was something that they had to experience. The common people's regal unexpectedly actually caused a wonderful change in the competitive relationship between them after he joined. This proved that the common people's regal had a unique charm of an emperor. However, wasn't this also proof of his strength? A hint of joy appeared on Lord of 10,000 Evils' face after hearing the Supreme Will's words. "Thank you, Lord Supreme Will," the Lord of 10,000 Evils said happily. The Supreme Will nodded, then said, "When the battle begins later, pay attention to protecting yourself. This decisive battle determines whether the Ultimate Void clan can continue to stay in the Ultimate Void battleground. He might attack a junior like you to vent his anger if the other party realizes that he can't stay. Don't let that get you killed. As you command." The Lord of 10,000 Evils' expression turned solemn as he immediately said respectfully. The Supreme Will nodded. Then, he looked into the distance. A moment later, his gaze suddenly focused. A majestic figure flew over rapidly from afar. In less than a moment, he arrived about 100,000 light-years away from the Supreme Will and Lord of 10,000 Evils. This position was just a matter of a thought to a Supreme Will realm expert. Not to mention the Supreme Will and Void Sovereign. There was little difference between the two sides now. The Supreme Will The Void Emperor said coldly, I didn't expect that I would have to fight you in the end. I wasn't going to fight you so soon. Unexpectedly, the plan is not as good as the change. The common people's regal under your command is really good. Where's him? Maybe he is scared and doesn't dare to come. Hearing that, the Supreme will laughed. That moment of peerless beauty caused Lord of 10,000 Evils to be slightly dazed. Then, he came back to his senses and hurriedly retracted his gaze. The Great Void Emperor actually used a provocative technique on a junior. It seems you really think you've lost a lot of face with my successor, which is why you're saying this. Void Emperor, you're getting worse. Don't worry. My successor is a smart person. He predicted that you would be exasperated and take revenge on him at all costs, so he returned early. Your opponent is me. The Supreme will chuckled. The Void Emperor's face sank hearing this. He indeed had the intention to take revenge on Zhou, who asked him to turn the situation of the ultimate Void battleground into such a state. Originally, he should have been the winner. He had lost all his advantages in the ultimate Void battleground, causing him to have no choice but to confront the Supreme Will personally because of that common people's regal. His original plan was about to go bankrupt because of common people's regal. The outcome of that plan was the key to his future attainment of the eternal immortal realm. There was a high probability that he would not be able to get it. The more he thought about these things, the angrier he became. His killing intent towards the common people's regal became stronger. The Supreme Will's perception was also extremely high. He quickly sensed the Void Emperor's emotions. He frowned slightly, feeling puzzled. Even if the common people's regal took back all the ultimate Void battleground regions that the other party had occupied, this Void Emperor shouldn't hate the common people's regal to such an extent, right? There was something strange about it. The Supreme Will was keenly aware of this. However, no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out the reason. There were too few clues after all. There was no time to think. The Void Emperor had already charged over by then. This guy knows one thing very well. That was, the victory of the war between they and the Supreme Will was actually in the hands of him and the Supreme Will. If the Supreme Will won, the victory of the war would belong to the Supreme Will. Chapter 1689, The Battle Begins. 3. It was the same even if the Void Emperor won. As for the other Supreme Will states, the victory of the Supreme Gods and those below the Supreme God level did not actually matter much to the victory of the war. Therefore, he didn't waste any words or schemes. He directly charged forward. Take care of yourself. The Supreme Will instructed Lord of 10,000 Evils before heading forward. An extremely intense battle began as soon as the two collided. The Lord of 10,000 Evils widened his eyes and looked at the place where the two sides were fighting, but he realized that he couldn't see anything. He gritted his teeth indignantly. He had almost forgotten that experts with strong willpower had already completely transcended laws and willpower. The battle scene between they was something that existences below the supreme willpower realm could not see at all. They were like existences in a higher dimension. Low-dimensional creatures could not spy on the actions of such powerful beings. However, even though they couldn't be seen and couldn't help the supreme will, they could still deal with the other enemies. He looked into the distance. As the Void Emperor and the Supreme Will fought, the ultimate Void race under him also charged in the direction of him and the Supreme Army. Kill! The Lord of 10,000 Evils wasn't afraid at all. He immediately led the 1,000 Evils army and Supreme Army and flew towards the ultimate Void race's army. In the Crimson Great Cosmos, Zhou 15 had already led the top Scarlet Lords to the territory of the chaotic Scarlet Divine Kingdom. Following that, they did not stop and charged straight for the Divine Kingdom's divine capital. Along the way, they had encountered many soldiers from the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom who wanted to stop but they were easily eliminated by them. They were unable to stop from advancing. The Chaotic Divine Capital. AUS looked at the 5 Scarlet Chaos humans in front of him, who were emitting the aura of supreme gods with excitement. He would never have thought that the Crimson Overlord, in order to reward him by establishing the beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom, would directly bestow 5 wisps of Scarlet Origin power. It was these 5 wisps of Scarlet Origin power that allowed the 5 Master God-tier advanced grade God spirits under him to directly advance to grade 1 Supreme God. Furthermore, with the enhancement of the Scarlet Origin power, even if they were to advance to the Supreme Will realm in the future, it would increase the chances of success by 3%. The 5 of them could be said to have a bright future. At the same time, AUS also tacitly acknowledged the 5 grade 1 supreme gods of them as the future ministers of his divine kingdom. With the worship of these 5 supreme gods, the flames of ambition in AUS' heart instantly soared. Furthermore, even the common people's regal whose reputation had recently suppressed the various worlds, he had the idea of competing with him. Oz' face darkened thinking of the common people's regal. He recalled what the Crimson Overlord had said to him after bestowing him with the 5 wisps of Scarlet Origin energy. Even though your current achievements are not bad, you are still far from that common people's regal. You will never have the right to be proud in front of him. You're gonna keep going. I don't expect you to surpass the common people's regal, but don't be defeated by the other Scarlet Lords. Otherwise, it will show that my judgment is too poor. If that should happen, you'll have to bear the consequences. Common people's regal. AUS gritted his teeth and said angrily, the Crimson Overlord said that I can't surpass you, but I don't think so. One day, I will trample you under my feet and make you call me your king. New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1690, Attacking the Chaotic Scarlet God. 1. AUS could not forget the huge defeat his clone had suffered during the tribulation of the 10,000 races when he met the common people's regal. In that battle, he had gathered the power of many Scarlet Lords, but they were still divided and defeated by that guy. He had also received severe punishment from the Crimson Overlord as the leader of that failed war. Since that incident, AUS was sensitive enough to realize that the Crimson Overlord, which had always been very satisfied with him, was starting to be disappointed in him. If it wasn't for that, if he could lead the Scarlet Lord and win the tribulation of 10,000 races, how could he not have been promoted to the 5th Reserve Army? He might have already become the official 5th Reserve Army of the Supreme Scarlet. Why would he need to compete with those weak and pitiful lords for this position? Common people's regal. It's all your fault. The more AUS thought about it, the more he hated common people's regal. However, at the same time, he subconsciously felt reverence and fear towards that fellow. Even he didn't sense such emotions, or rather, he vaguely sensed them, but he wasn't willing to face them. Right at that moment, report. A loud shout was heard. Then, a messenger quickly ran in from outside the hall. He knelt in front of AUS and said anxiously, reporting to your majesty. Just now, the city lord of Border City, Lord Fry, sent news that the king of the Succubus Divine Kingdom, Noctil, had led the Scarlet Army of the Death Scarlet Divine Kingdom, the Devil Scarlet Divine Kingdom, the Shadow Scarlet Divine Kingdom, the Dark Scarlet Divine Kingdom, and a total of 25 other Scarlet Divine Kingdoms to attack. Currently, the territory north of the Divine Kingdom has completely fallen. Moreover, this allied Scarlet Army is charging towards our chaotic Scarlet God at an astonishing speed. General Fry has died on the battlefield. AUS was stunned. He did not even come back to his senses for a moment. He finally reacted and angrily said after a long while ****. That loser Noctil, I spared he for the sake of the Succubus God Lord. It's fine if he isn't grateful, but he actually dares to attack again. He even brought a group of weak lords and tried to overthrow this emperor's rule. Where did they get the guts to fight against a defeated opponent and a bunch of useless people? Turin. He looked at one of the 5 newly promoted supreme gods below. He wore blood-colored armor and carried an extremely long snow-white sword on his back. He wore a helmet, and only his scarlet eyes were exposed. "Your Majesty, I'm here," Turin said respectfully and coldly. "This emperor commands you to lead your master god-level army, the Scarlet Blood Army, to the enemy and destroy this arrogant and stupid fellow." Aus said coldly. "Yes, Your Majesty." Turin's voice was monotonous, but anyone could hear the intense killing intent in his words. After he received the order, he did not say anything else. He immediately stood up and left the shrine's main hall. "Your Majesty, don't worry. With Your Excellency Turin's help, those defeated opponents will not be able to return. Your Excellency Turin has just advanced to become a Grade 1 Supreme God. I was just worried that there was no place to do anything, but the other party took the initiative to come knocking on my door. It's really good. You guys are making my hands itch." The other 4 supreme gods chatted and laughed, completely disregarding the invasion of the succubus Divine Kingdom and other Divine Kingdom factions. They were supreme gods. Even if it was just a newly promoted Grade 1 supreme god, it was not something that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could scam. A group of defeated generals from a Divine Kingdom Lord's faction was indeed not worthy of their attention. Except, while they were chatting happily, they did not notice Aus' thoughtful expression. Aus looked up and saw the 4 supreme gods conversing on their own. He did not find it strange. A supreme god should have such confidence. However, after a moment of silence, he said, "Guru, Azra, Mazo, Kando. The 4 of you, go help Turin too." As soon as he said that, the 4 supreme gods were stunned. "Your Majesty, why? Are you not confident in Your Excellency Turin's strength?" Mazo could not help but ask. Perhaps because he had become a supreme god, he had become much bolder. In the past, he would never have dared to say such words to Aus's heart sank. Mazo was becoming more and more unruly after he advanced to the supreme god level. He actually dared to question him. He said expressionlessly, "Even though the succubus god lord is a little arrogant, the Divine Kingdom lords that he brought are not all stupid. Since they dared to come under the leadership of a defeated opponent like Noctil, they must have some trump card to make they confident enough to attack. This emperor guesses that there's a high chance that it's also a supreme god level technique. That's why this emperor sent you guys along. Go. Didn't you say that your hands were itching? Then use the enemy in front of you to test your current methods." Aus said. Even though he was a little proud of being valued by the Crimson Overlord, this did not mean that he was rash. On the contrary, it was precisely because of the Crimson Overlord's favor that he felt that he had the hope of becoming the 5th Reserve Army of the Crimson Overlord. Therefore, he cherished everything in front of him even more. It also made him treat every choice more seriously. He didn't want to lose the great situation in front of him because of a moment of carelessness. Chapter 1691, Attacking the Chaotic Scarlet God. 2. Existences like the common people's regal were all promoted with caution. Even though I despise him and want to defeat him, this advantage of his is indeed worth learning. Aus thought to himself. Yes, Your Grace. Even though the 4 supreme gods felt that their emperor was making a mountain out of a molehill, they did not dare to refute like Mazo. After saying that, they left. Aus stared at their back as they left. A coldness gradually surfaced in his eyes. These guys are relying on the fact that they have become supreme gods and have begun to disrespect me in their hearts. Strength is a double-edged sword. If it weren't for the fact that I already have my own path and don't want to use the Scarlet Origin power to forcibly increase my strength, how would you have a share in advancing to the Supreme God level? I'm already the first to become a Supreme God. Aus muttered to himself. Thinking of this, he thought of the legendary Lord of the Supreme Great Cosmos, common people's regal. How did he do it? I heard that everyone in his territory, from the supreme gods to the ordinary civilians, is extremely loyal to him. Foreign life forms want to instigate the subjects of the blazing sun divine kingdom, but after many parties took action, none of them succeeded in instituting the incite defection. Instead, they lost a large amount of resources. Furthermore, that guy advanced to Supreme God not long ago. His strength has actually improved again. Common people's regal. Aus narrowed his eyes. Even though he was very unwilling to admit it, it had to be said that there were many aspects of he that he admired and even worshipped. Of course, this did not hinder Aus' determination to defeat him. He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He continued to review the memorials. Now that the Scarlet Divine Kingdom of Chaos had just been established, various matters came one after another. He had been dealing with these matters for almost half a day. Should I also create a clone technique? It said that many high-level lords use this method to free themselves from complicated matters so that they can focus on cultivating and increasing their strength. Aus mumbled as the name of that existence appeared in his mind again. He shook his head, feeling like he was possessed. At the same time, in the chaotic Scarlet Divine Kingdom. Central Region, Tower City. Zhou 15 and the rest boarded the spaceship. They saw a scarlet race wearing blood-colored armor and a blood-colored helmet, revealing only a pair of scarlet eyes as soon as they arrived. They carried a snow-white longsword on their backs and were floating in midair. They quietly watched they arrive, as if they had been waiting for a long time. I am Turin. Turin said coldly, today, you ignorant invaders will die, swoosh. A terrifying arrow wrapped in the power of 10,000 gods, carrying a shocking aura that swept through the world, flew towards Turin at the speed of teleportation. Wherever it passed, the scarlet clouds in the sky were torn apart, creating a wide and straight passageway. The tower city on the ground was also swept away by the arrow's powerful arrow aura, creating a ruined path. Time and space stopped. Heaven and earth were silent. Terror had just surfaced in Turin's originally cold eyes when the arrow pierced straight through his glabella before shooting straight into the sky and disappearing. Turin's eyes widened. He never expected his ending to be like this. He had just become a Grade 1 Supreme God, and his beautiful life as a Supreme God had yet to begin. How did it end? I can't take this. Turin spat out a few mouthfuls of divine blood and said with a trembling voice. Then, he quickly lost his breath. Grade 1 Supreme God, dead. On the side of the Scarlet Alliance army, Bai Yun sheathed her bow and stood up. His expression was calm. He was not proud at all that he had killed a Grade 1 Supreme God. He had even killed a Grade 4 Supreme God, let alone a mere Grade 1 Supreme God. He turned around and returned to the Succubus Lord's side, standing with his bow. His expression was calm, as if he had just done something insignificant. The surrounding Scarlet Lords were silent. They looked at Bai Yun in a daze, their hearts already in turmoil. A Grade 1 Supreme God was killed just like that. Why did it feel like killing a Grade 1 Supreme God by the Succubus Lord's side was as easy as killing a chicken? Could this Supreme God be a Grade 4 Supreme God? Thinking of this, they took a deep breath and contributed to the warming of the Crimson Great Cosmos. Grade 4 Supreme God. That was a top Supreme God. He was only one step away from the Supreme Will realm. Such an existence had actually appeared in front of them, and had even become a supreme god consecrated by the succubus god-lord. They felt that their worldview had been overturned. When they looked at the succubus god-lord again, their eyes were filled with shock and jealousy. What kind of price did this succubus lord pay to actually be able to invite such a top supreme god as her worshipped god? It couldn't be that pretty boy who charmed all living beings, right? Moreover, if this supreme god had such strength the moment he attacked, what kind of shocking strength did the lord standing on the other side of the succubus lord have? This unfamiliar supreme god seemed to be on the same level as this supreme god who used arrows. Could it be that this person was also a top supreme god? All the god lords looked at each other and saw the meaning in each other's eyes. He had to be more respectful to this succubus lord in the future. Two top-notch scarlet supreme gods. If it was true, even AUS, who had a chance of becoming the 5th reserve army of the Scarlet Supreme, could not compare to him. Needless to say, they were Scarlet Lords who were even inferior to Aus. This was a huge thigh. They had to hold on tight. However, a doubt appeared in their heart at the same time. Since the succubus lord already has such a powerful expert protecting her, why does she need they to come and help? Is it because we don't have enough troops? Or is there some other reason? Many thoughts surfaced in the Scarlet Lord's minds. Zhou 15 naturally did not know what they was thinking. He could guess a thing or two just by guessing, but he didn't care. If he revealed his strength, he would reveal his strength. Otherwise, he couldn't possibly run away when he saw the Supreme God, right? Then he could forget about conquering a small chaotic scarlet divine kingdom for the rest of his life. Moreover, exposing his strength would make these Scarlet Lords more convinced of him, and make it easier for him to command them to do things for him in the future. The matter of him establishing a beginner-grade Master God-tier nation would probably fall on them. At this time, it would be easier to conquer them with their strength and arrange for them to establish a Master God-tier kingdom in the future. Most importantly, with the Reality Cube, Bai Yun and their strength would be exposed. The Reality Cube should be able to cover it up. Zhou 15 did not let the Reality Cube recognize him as its master. Its owner was still the Supreme Will. Zhou and his many clones only had the right to use it. However, Zhou 15 inexplicably felt that the cube could hide it from the Crimson Overlord even with only the right to use it. This made Zhou 15 feel that the Reality Cube was not simple. He did not think too much about it and continued to lead the Scarlet Alliance army towards the capital of the Divine Kingdom of Chaos. On the way, they happened to encounter the other 4 Scarlet Supreme Gods who dared to come together. At first, the 4 Supreme Gods were very surprised that the Succubus Lord Scarlet Alliance army could not get past Turin and come to them. They, who were a step late, thought that Turin alone could defeat the Scarlet Alliance army formed by defeated opponents. However, they did not think too much about it and prepared to continue attacking the Scarlet Alliance army, wanting to claim the credit. And then, they were killed. He looked exactly the same as Turin. Let's keep going. The Succubus Lord's calm voice came from the main ship of more than 100 spaceships. The Scarlet Lords did not dare to be negligent and continued their journey. Most of they lacked courage before they set off, however, after experiencing these 2 battles, they were already confident of their goal. Perhaps this was the confidence brought about by strength. New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1692, Destroying the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. 1. The capital of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. AUS was handling administrative matters. Right at that moment, another messenger quickly ran over from outside the shrine's main hall and knelt on the ground. He looked flustered, his eyes were filled with shock, as he had found out something unbelievable. Aus couldn't help but frown when he saw this. Was the quality of the messengers of their Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom that low? You get all flustered at the slightest thing. He was now the master of the beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom and had 7 supreme gods under his command. With such powerful strength in hand, it was no exaggeration to say that he was not afraid of any enemies other than those at the Supreme Will realm. He had a relationship that Crimson Overlord valued even if a Supreme Willpower realm expert really attacked. Even a Supreme Willpower realm expert wouldn't easily do anything to him. Therefore, he looked down on his messenger's flustered behavior. Could this messenger not know which country he was from? He was now a messenger of the powerful Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. How could he meet the experts of the other divine kingdoms when he was shocked by small matters in the future? If this were to happen again in the future, it would be a disgrace to him. Aus, who valued his reputation very much, had already decided to wait for a while and order his ministers to replace this messenger. However, he still said indifferently, "Yes. Your Majesty, it's urgent." The messenger said anxiously, "I just received the latest news. The 5 newly promoted supreme gods sent by His Majesty have all died at the hands of the Scarlet Alliance army led by the Succubus Lord. Since the 5 supreme gods were unable to stop the other party, this Scarlet Alliance army has already entered the inner territory of our divine kingdom and is not far from the chaotic Scarlet Divine Capital. If there are no experts to stop them, it won't be long before they arrives at our chaotic Scarlet God Capital and poses a threat to our God Capital and His Majesty." What? Aus sat up in shock and looked at the messenger in disbelief from his first sentence. The other Scarlet ministers in the shrine also listened to the messenger in a daze, as if they were listening to some fantasy story. By the time the messenger finished speaking, the entire hall had been silent for a long time. "No way!" a minister suddenly shouted angrily after an unknown period of time. This minister was the Prime Minister of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. He was also a Chaos Scarlet human. He and Aus had worked together since the beginning of their rise and had made many contributions along the way. Now, his status had risen step by step and he had become Aus' most trusted Prime Minister of the Divine Kingdom. Even the selection of the 5 newly advanced Supreme Gods was handled by him. It could be seen how much Aus trusted him. At this moment, after he heard the messenger's words, he looked at the other party with red eyes and said angrily, "Are you joking? The Succubus Lord is just a defeated opponent. How can she have the strength to kill 5 of our newly advanced Supreme Gods?" "Prime Minister." The messenger trembled and said in fear, "How could I dare to lie about this? I saw it with my own eyes. There's also a photographic stone here that records the scene of the death. I can play it for you if you don't believe me." The Prime Minister stared at him without saying a word. He didn't dare to look. "Play it," Aus said in a gloomy tone. "Yes, Your Grace," the messenger said respectfully. Then, he took out the photographic stone with trembling hands and injected energy into it. On the surface of the transparent photographic stone, various illusory scenes kept changing. Finally, a virtual scene was projected in front of the ministers and Aus. The recording of this virtual scene was very comprehensive and realistic. Aus and the ministers could not see any problems. Upon seeing this, they had already realized that what was recorded in the virtual scene was the truth. There was nothing fake about it. After the virtual scene was played, the ministers present, including the Prime Minister and Aus, who was sitting on the throne, fell silent. In their expression, there was only one other expression other than disbelief and shock. Fear. All the ministers of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom looked at the 2 supreme gods behind the Succubus Lord in fear. Especially that supreme god who used superb archery skills. "Top supreme god," one of the Scarlet ministers said bitterly. The other Scarlet Ministers were silent and did not retort. Killing a Grade 1 Supreme God with one arrow. He was definitely a top Supreme God with such strength. However, the problem was, why did Noctil, who had been looked down upon by them, suddenly have two top Supreme Gods under his command? Furthermore, after they had just defeated the other party had two top Supreme Gods under their command. At that time, they clearly remembered how heavily injured and on the verge of death the succubus God Lord was. How long has it been? How did it become like this? Now, they even had to look up to the succubus Lord who had these two top Supreme Gods. Because, even Emperor Aus, whom they revered the most, only had two Grade 3 Supreme God Realm Supreme Gods under him. They were still a little lacking even though they were very close to the top Supreme Gods. Chapter 1693, Destroying the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. 2. They would definitely not be able to resist if these two top Supreme Gods attacked. The suppression of a top Supreme God on a non-top Supreme God was too great. They could not think of any possibility of a comeback no matter how they thought about it. What now? All the Scarlet Ministers present were pondering this question. Then, they couldn't help but look at Aus, who was sitting on the throne. Aus also noticed their gazes. While he appeared calm on the surface, he was already starting to feel lost on the inside. Two top Supreme Gods. What could he use to fight? If the two Grade 3 Supreme God realms under him heard that they were fighting against two top Supreme Gods, they would probably go their separate ways in the blink of an eye and abandon him. The two Grade 3 Supreme God realms were originally invited by him at a great cost. Be it to his chaotic Scarlet Divine Kingdom or to him as Divine Being. Hoping that they would risk their lives to protect him and his Divine Kingdom. Are you kidding me? Aus would be thankful if they did not defect to the enemy and offered themselves to the enemy. So what should I do now? Aus thought about it and realized that there were only two paths left in front of him. One was to run for his life. Even though Aus was extremely unwilling to take this path, his life was at stake. He could only take this path if he had no choice. The second option was to surrender. Aus only thought about this path for a moment before he abandoned it without hesitation. Surrendering to a former loser. He could not accept it psychologically. He would rather flee in a sorry state than surrender and live an ignoble life. He took a deep breath, turned to look at the god spirits, and said, "Everyone. As you can see, there are actually two experts suspected to be top Supreme Gods in the Succubus Lord Scarlet Alliance army. This Emperor doesn't know where he hired such an expert, but an expert of this level is definitely not someone we can deal with. The only outcome left for us would be destruction if we were to forcefully resist it. Everyone. Aus said in a low voice, let's escape. It's not embarrassing to run away from a top Supreme God. Silence. The ministers present fell silent. They looked at Aus in a daze. They did not expect His Majesty to make such a decision. Aus had just established the territory of a beginner-grade Master God-tier Lord. He had even received a reward from the Crimson Overlord not long ago. Logically speaking, he should be at his peak right now. Unexpectedly, he encountered such a crisis that was enough to destroy the Divine Kingdom today, forcing Aus to give up on the newly established Master God-tier kingdom and escape. They were both shocked and somewhat impressed. If it were them, they might not be able to be as decisive as Aus and give up the Master God-tier kingdom that they had just established so easily. Perhaps the Succubus Lord would attack and destroy them while they were hesitating. Aus also saw the admiration in the minister's eyes. He looked calm on the surface, but his heart was bleeding. You think that's what I want? If it weren't for the fact that there was no way to resolve the current crisis, how could he easily give up on the divine kingdom that he had just established? He knew very well that once he gave up on the divine kingdom that he had just built, he would come out of this place in a sorry state. Not only did it mean that he had lost everything he had accumulated so far, but most importantly, his performance would definitely disappoint the Crimson Overlord. When the Crimson Overlord saw his performance, it would definitely remove him from the preselection range of the 5th Reserve Army of the Crimson Overlord. He would really have no chance of becoming the 5th Reserve Army of the Crimson Overlord. Succubus Lord. What is so good about you? Why are you able to get the help of 2 top supreme gods? Why did you force me to this point? You caused all this. D****. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have easily accepted the Succubus God Lord's plea and spared your life. Instead, I should have completely crushed you to death so that you wouldn't have a chance to start all over again. A moment of weakness actually raised such a huge disaster. AUS was extremely regretful at this moment. However, the compensation that the Succubus God Lord had given him back then was indeed enough, and he had built a new Master God tier kingdom at a time when he needed resources the most. He also thought that he was just a defeated opponent, so what could he do? Therefore, he agreed to the Succubus God Lord's request. I didn't expect the Succubus Lord to really turn the world upside down. AUS sighed in his heart. However, he also knew that this was no longer the time to blame himself for his past. Escape was the most important thing now. Everyone, let's split up and retreat. This way, we won't be caught by them all at once. AUS stood up and looked at the ministers below. If this emperor survives this time and makes a comeback in the future, he will definitely not forget all the ministers. When the time comes, we'll fight for the position of the Master of the Universe. When he said this, he did not feel confident at all. The ministers below also responded one after another. Their expressions were extremely concerned, but their hearts were very calm. They did not have any hope of making a comeback. How could there be so many people making a comeback in this world? Most experts would not be able to stand up after falling. Looks like he'll have to find a new master in the future. The Scarlet Ministers thought to themselves. Then, they couldn't help but think of the Succubus Lord who came here. Wouldn't the Succubus Lord with 2 top supreme gods be the best candidate to seek refuge with? At the thought of this, they glanced at AUS on the throne and lowered their heads quietly, not letting AUS notice their strange gazes. AUS naturally did not know that these guys were already planning to seek refuge with the Succubus Lord, his greatest enemy, just as they were about to disband. He immediately packed up and found a direction before teleporting away after he made this decision. AUS was a Master God tier who had achieved success with the laws of chaos. He grasped many methods, especially in terms of teleportation. With the augmentation of the laws of chaos, his teleportation speed and distance were even stronger than that of a Master God tier who was good at teleportation. Just as he thought that he was about to escape, his expression suddenly changed. At the same time, Zhou 15 and gang had already led their army to the Crimson God of Chaos. When they arrived, they were surprised to discover that there were no defensive and counter-attacking facilities set up here. It was like a beauty who had given up resisting and looked like they could take her whole. This is giving up. Zhou 11 stroked his chin. It made sense. They had not concealed their strength at all along the way. If they could not make the other party give up resisting, he would really have to admire the other party's courage. Come on. With Zhou 15's order, the Allied forces descended into the chaotic Scarlet capital. With 2 top supreme gods around, they was not afraid of being ambushed. Soon, they landed in AUS Shrine. The shrine here was extremely vast and had the law of space added to it, so it was more than enough to accommodate them. Not long after they came down, they saw a group of scarlet ministers in scarlet official uniforms running over together. Then, they came in front of they and said respectfully and fearfully, "Greetings, Your Majesty Succubus. We are willing to surrender and serve Your Majesty. Please spare our lives, Your Majesty. You're smart." Zhou 15 chuckled. After saying that, he looked around and asked, "Where's AUS?" The leader of the officials, the Prime Minister of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom, stood up and said, "Your Majesty, AUS had already escaped alone. But don't worry, Your Excellency. I've already sent the two supreme gods to chase after them. They should be back soon." 3 figures descended from the sky just as he said that. The 2 figures on both sides were 2 grade 3 scarlet supreme gods. As for the figure who was caught in the middle and looked like he had nothing to live for was the master of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom, AUS. Chapter 1694, Demarcation of Territories. 1. Zhou 15 looked at the despairing AUS and couldn't help but laugh. It didn't feel good to be stabbed in the back by his own people, right? He stood up and walked in front of Aus. He looked at Aus' familiar face and said meaningfully, "Aus. It's been a long time." AUS did not understand what the succubus lord meant. It's been a long time. Didn't they see each other not long ago? At that time, the succubus lord was still defeated by him. Who would have thought that the situation would be reversed not long after? The victor, the king, and the loser. Feel free to do so if you want to kill or torture me. AUS lowered his head and said. Zhou 15 clicked his tongue and said in surprise, "Your cerulean planet culture is not bad." As the common people's regal became the Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army and the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom became one of the top Lord factions in the Myriad Worlds, the culture of the cerulean planet also spread to the Myriad Worlds. However, Zhou 15 was still a little surprised to hear a Scarlet Lord say the idiom of cerulean planet in the Scarlet Great Cosmos. Has the culture of the cerulean planet spread to another universe? AUS did not answer. Zhou 15 didn't ask further. Instead, he asked, "Do you have anything else to say before you die?" Zhou 15 actually admired AUS, the little common people's regal of the Crimson Great Cosmos. In addition, his way of hiding was very similar to his main body, so Zhou 15 was willing to give he the chance to leave his last words. As for subduing him, impossible. Even though AUS talent was not bad and he had also cultivated to the Master God tier level at this time, this guy's identity was too sensitive and could easily attract the attention of the Crimson Overlord. Hence, not leaving AUS behind was the best choice. AUS couldn't help but look up at Zhou 15 after hearing Scarlet Lord's words. "Succubus Lord. I once let you go. Aren't you gonna let me live?" When Zhou 15 heard this, he really started to think seriously. Let AUS live? It's not impossible. The original body had indeed been spared by him after all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to enter the Succubus Lord's body. While his original body and his original body were not big shots, there was such a cause and effect after all. In addition, he was worried that AUS would expose his identity if he was with him, but couldn't he just not let AUS stay by his side? And finally, there's another very important reason. Zhou 15 touched his chest where his heart was. He, or rather, his main body, already had the arrogance of an expert. Facing a defeated loser who was no threat to him, he was very willing to show his tolerance. The current him no longer needed to carefully survive like before after all. He pursued the elimination of the root of the problem and eliminated future troubles. He was not even 1/10,000th of himself when AUS was at his peak. Even if he could make a comeback in the future, it would probably be very difficult for him to reach his former peak. This emperor can let you live. But this emperor wants to cripple your divine spirit realm and lord talent. Zhou 15 said. Au's face immediately turned pale. Cripple his god spirit realm and lord talent. This was making it impossible for him to rise again. Still, as long as he could survive, it didn't matter if he rose again or not. Okay. Please use your means, your majesty. Aus gritted his teeth and said. Zhou 15 nodded. He looked at Aus, and a golden light flashed in his eyes. The next second, Aus felt the divine spark in his mind shatter quietly. The vast amount of divine power in the divine spark also turned into countless energies that dissipated from his body and returned to heaven and earth. And the power of his will quietly dissipated into nothingness. He was now like an ordinary scarlet life form. He only had a normal body and soul. He was not even a black iron tier superhuman. At the same time, he also felt that his lord talent had instantly vanished without a trace, as if it had been stolen. Aus was in a daze. He knew that he had fallen from heaven to hell. The power and glory of the past were now completely isolated from him. He had now officially become the most ordinary member of the endless living beings. Just go. Zhou 15 said calmly. Thank you, Succubus Lord. Your Majesty. Aus said bitterly. Then, he stood up and staggered away weakly. After walking for a long time, he finally walked out of the vision of the gods. Only then did he dare to look back. It's over. Aus muttered to himself. At that moment, he felt a sense of loss and heaviness, but he also felt a sense of relaxation that he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it would be a good thing for me to give it all up. An ordinary life might give me another kind of satisfaction. With the expectation of another life and a sense of relaxation, Aus walked briskly into the distance. At the same time, Your Majesty, would you like me to? Bai Yun said in a low voice. He knew Zhou 15's personality and style of doing things very well, which was why he asked this question. No need. Zhou 15 shook his head. He looked at Au's departing figure. Even at this moment, he still didn't have any premonitions. This proved that the other party was indeed no longer a threat to him. Zhou 15 was blessed by great luck and trusted his premonition very much. Since his premonition did not warn him, there was a high chance that the other party would never rise again. Come on. Zhou 15 did not think too much about it. He turned around and entered the shrine, quickly obtaining control of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. Chapter 1695, Demarcation of Territories. 2. And when the control was in his hands, Zhou 15 had a thought. The request to advance to a high-level Master God-tier Lord appeared in front of him. Among them, the requirement to conquer the Lord territory of the 3 beginner-grade Master God-tier Lords under the Crimson Overlord had changed from 0/3 to 1/3. Zhou 15 nodded slightly. Linger's spiritual medicine Master God-tier kingdom had already been taken over by the country. Now, as long as he conquered 2 more beginner-grade Master God-tier Lord territories under the Crimson Overlord, he would be able to meet all the advancement requirements and upgrade the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom to a high-level Master God-tier Lord territory. Thinking of this, Zhou 15 looked at the other Scarlet Lords of the Scarlet Divine Kingdom. A portion of the Scarlet Lords looked in the direction where Aus had left and sighed with a complicated expression. Another portion of the Lords looked at Zhou 15 excitedly, as if he was a superstar. Zhou 15 smiled in his heart. He naturally knew what they was thinking. Aus had always been suppressing them. Among all the Scarlet Lords, he was the most likely candidate to become the 5th Reserve Army. They had actually easily destroyed the Scarlet First Lord under the leadership of the Succubus Lord, causing him to fall from heaven into the dust. Everyone who had experienced this feeling of defying the heavens and turning the tables to defeat their competitors knew. At the thought of the huge Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom, they might be able to share some of the benefits. How could they not be excited? Allies. Zhou 15 said, now that the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom has been destroyed in our hands, this emperor won't say much. Let's divide this Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. The Scarlet Lord's eyes lit up as they stared at Zhou 15, waiting for him to continue. In this war, this emperor is the main force and has contributed the most. Therefore, this emperor wants all the wealth of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom and half of its territory. As for the remaining half of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom's territory, logically speaking, this emperor should have distributed it to everyone present. But now, this emperor suddenly has a new idea. This emperor can give you two choices. 1. From this half of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom's territory, this emperor can divide this portion of the Divine Kingdom's territory for you according to how much effort you have put in. 2. Give up your portion of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom's territory, and this emperor can help your Lord faction advance from a Divine Kingdom Lord faction to a Master God Tier Lord faction. Guys, what's your choice? Zhou 15 asked. The 25 Scarlet Lords looked at each other and saw the shock and suspicion in each other's eyes. Can there be such a good thing? Was this Succubus Lord really willing to help them become a Lord faction in the Master God Tier Kingdom? And he only wanted some territories. This is impossible, right? If one had the strength, they could have as many territories as they wanted. And the resources to advance to the Master God Tier Kingdom were not easy to obtain. What motive did this Succubus Lord have for him to say such a thing? The Scarlet Lords were speechless. Zhou 15 knew what they was thinking when he saw their expressions. He shook his head inwardly. If he had said this in the Supreme Great Cosmos, any Divine Kingdom Lord would have agreed decisively by now. They would not be as hesitant as them. Forget it. Things like prestige should be accumulated bit by bit. In any case, he would have to stay in the Crimson Great Cosmos in the future. This emperor knows that you might find it hard to believe. But why don't you take a look at the two top supreme gods behind me? Zhou 15 pointed at Bai Yun and the other two supreme gods behind him and teased, do you still think that this emperor can't help you advance to become a Divine Kingdom Lord with them around? The Scarlet Lords immediately reacted. That's right. With these two top supreme gods around, it would be very easy for the Succubus Lord to gather the resources to advance to the beginner grade Master God Tier Kingdom. If the other party wanted to support a few Divine Kingdom Lord factions and promote them to Master God Tier Kingdom Lord factions, it was indeed not impossible. Your Grace, we believe you. The Shadow Lord of the Scarlet Divine Kingdom said, but can you tell us why you paid such a huge price to support us to become the Lords of the Master God Tier Kingdom? I don't think a few territories are worth His Majesty paying such a huge price to exchange for, right? The other Scarlet Lords also looked at Zhou 15. This was also the reason for their doubts and hesitation. Zhou 15 smiled and said, you're a smart lord. Alright, since you've thought of this emperor won't hide it from you. From some sources, this emperor learned that the Crimson Overlord hopes that more Master God Tier nations will be born in our Crimson Great Cosmos. If this emperor helps you build a beginner grade Master God Tier nation, it will most likely increase this emperor's importance in the Crimson Overlord's heart. It will also increase this emperor's chips to become the Crimson Overlord in the future. That's why this emperor wants to help you. There's another reason. This emperor recently learned that in the future, when a beginner grade Master God Tier Kingdom advances to an intermediate grade Master God Tier Kingdom or a high-level Master God Tier Kingdom, one needs to conquer other Master God Tier Kingdoms in order to complete the advancement. The speed of your advancement is too slow. This emperor wants to help you build it quickly. This way, when this emperor needs it, he can directly choose to attack the newly advanced beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdoms to fulfill the requirements to advance to Master God-tier kingdoms. Do you have any other questions this time? Zhou 15 asked. What he said was 80% true and 20% false. However, it was precisely because of this way of speaking that the Scarlet Lords present believed him even more. I see. The Scarlet Lords were enlightened. At this moment, they no longer had any hesitation on their faces. Most of the life forms in the world were afraid of the unknown. When the unknown was solved and became known, no matter how terrifying this known was, in his heart, he already had a trace of confidence from knowing. No more questions. Your Majesty, would you mind if we discuss this? Cain said respectfully. Zhou 15 nodded. When the lords heard this, they started discussing. They didn't hide it from Zhou 15. After hearing the contents of their conversation, a faint smile appeared on Zhou 15's face. A moment later, the Scarlet Lords finished their discussion. Then, Lord Solon of the Dark and Scarlet Divine Kingdom stood up and said, Your Majesty the Succubus, we have finished our discussion. Among the 25 Scarlet Lords, Lord Cain and I are willing to accept His Majesty's help and strive to establish our Master God-tier kingdom as soon as possible. As for the other Scarlet Lords, His Majesty will see how much effort he makes to divide the territory of them. Zhou 15 looked at the other Scarlet Lords. The other Scarlet Lords did not retort even though they had different expressions. Zhou 15 nodded. In that case, this emperor will divide it up for you now. After saying that, he immediately took out a map of the territory of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. Then, he divided his main territory into half and submitted it to the Succubus Divine Kingdom. In the other half of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom's territory, Zhou 15 divided it into 23 parts according to the contribution of the 23 Scarlet Lords. Then, he showed it to them. They all agreed to this territorial division after they finished reading and confirmed that there were no problems. Then, just as Zhou 15 was about to leave with Solon and Cain, he heard the king of the Shadow Elven Divine Kingdom carefully say, Your Majesty, you should be attacking the Scarlet Lord's territories next, right? We can help too. When the time comes, Your Majesty can just give us a little territory like today. We won't ask for too much. We just hope to help Your Majesty. Zhou 15 stroked his chin and nodded with a smile. It seemed that they wanted to use Solon and Cain as scouts to see if they were really willing to help them establish a beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom. Well, make other plans after confirming it. That was why they suggested helping. This way, not only could he have the chance to apply for his help in the future to establish a beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom, he could also avoid becoming enemies with him, preventing him from hearing the news of the Succubus Lords attack the moment he returned to the Divine Kingdom. Killing two birds with one stone. However, this was exactly what he wanted. Therefore, he agreed. Chapter 1696, Inheritance of the Chaos Will. The Common People's Cauldron Strengthened. 1. The Scarlet Lords present heaved a sigh of relief seeing that the Succubus Lord had agreed to their requests. They looked at Lord Solon and Lord Cain. Next, it would depend on whether these two powerful lords could successfully obtain the help of the Succubus Lord and successfully advance to a beginner-grade Master God-tier Lord faction. If they really became the lord of a beginner Master God-tier kingdom with the help of the Succubus Lord, they would also need to apply for his help to establish a beginner Master God-tier kingdom. It was too difficult to establish a beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom by themselves, after all. Who knew how many years they would have to wait if they were to do it by themselves? It would be much easier with the help of an expert. They could not help but look at the two top supreme gods behind the Succubus Lord. It was good to have an expert by his side. Why couldn't they encounter such a good thing? They sighed in their hearts. At this moment, Lord Solon and Lord Kane also noticed the other Scarlet Lords looking at them. They sneered in their hearts. These people treated him as the vanguard, so how could they not have their own schemes? As the saying went, the first person to eat crabs would obtain unimaginable benefits. By the time they established the Master God-tier kingdom with the help of the Succubus Lord in the future, he might have already obtained more benefits. One step behind, one step behind. That's how the disparity develops. As for why they dared to be the first to eat crabs, other than the benefits given by the Succubus Lord, the most important thing was that the dark scarlet gods behind Lord Solon and the scarlet gods behind Lord Kane had the protection of the scarlet supreme gods. Even if the Succubus Lord suddenly attacked, in the future, who had the protection of the supreme god, actually had the ability to protect themselves. That was why they dared to eat the crab. Zhou 15, who was sitting on the throne, could understand their inner thoughts with a simple glance. His heart did not waver at all. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes and plots were laughable. Let they play by themselves. Zhou 15 couldn't be bothered. After that, the other Scarlet Lords other than Lord Solon and Lord Kane took their leave. After Zhou 15 dismissed his attendants, he directly asked them, "What else do you need to advance to the beginner grade Master God-tier kingdom? Tell me." Lord Solon and Lord Kane looked at each other. Then, they told each other what they needed to level up. Zhou 15 shook his head. You have a beginner level Divine Kingdom Lord faction and an intermediate grade Divine Kingdom Lord faction. Let's upgrade the territory to a high-level Divine Kingdom Lord faction first. It's the resource needed for an upgrade. Take it and upgrade it. Zhou 15 threw 2 world rings to them. Solon and Kane's eyes lit up when they saw this. They first thanked him respectfully, then immediately took the rings with both hands and used their willpower to inspect it. When they saw the upgrade resources inside, they could no longer suppress the excitement in their hearts. Excitement appeared on their faces. The resources inside were enough for them to upgrade their respective territories to true God-tier advanced grade territories and upgrade their respective countries to high-level Divine Kingdom Lords. So this is the benefit of cozying up to someone powerful. It is simply worth it. The 2 lords of the Divine Kingdoms could no longer hide their excitement and gratitude to Zhou 15. Their gazes were no different from looking at their ancestors. You guys can leave. After you upgrade to a high-level Divine Kingdom Lord tomorrow, come and ask this Emperor for follow-up resources. Zhou 15 waved his hand and said, "Yes, Your Grace." Solon and Aus left. Zhou 15 looked at their departing figure and fell into deep thought. They was promoted to a beginner grade Master God-tier Lord faction and lacked 3 resources the most. Chaos Divine Treasure. Scarlet Hero. Scarlet Holy Artifact, a divine artifact of the race contaminated by the Scarlet Aura. The Chaos Divine Treasure was very simple. The Chaos Divine Treasure required to advance to the beginner grade Master God-tier kingdom only required 500 units. 2 beginner grade Master God-tier kingdoms only cost 1,000 units. Scarlet Heroes were a little troublesome. This was because he did not have the Hero Inheritance Manual of the Scarlet Creature. However, it won't be too hard to solve this. Attacking a few Scarlet Divine Kingdom Lord factions could easily obtain hundreds of thousands or even millions of Scarlet Heroes' Hero Inheritance Manuals. When the time came, he could give these Hero Inheritance Manuals to Solon and easily create a large number of Scarlet Heroes. Scarlet Holy Artifacts were not difficult. It was the same as obtaining the Hero Inheritance Secret Manual. Attacking Divine Kingdom Lords or Scarlet Race forces could easily obtain a large number of Scarlet Holy Artifacts. Looks like the war on my side won't stop. Zhou 15 called Bai Yun over. Bai Yun soon came over. Your Majesty. Bai Yun said respectfully, tell the Scarlet Lords to stop. Just say that this emperor intends to immediately launch a war of conquest around the Succubus Divine Kingdom after reorganizing the troops and wealth of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. Get they to bring their troops to the Succubus Divine Kingdom to prepare for a new war with this emperor at any time. Zhou 15 said. Ain't they willing to help? Let's start now. It was impossible to be promoted to a resource master for nothing. Pay first before anything else. Yes, Your Grace. Bai Yun said respectfully. Then, she turned around and went to do her work. After Aus left, Zhou 15 stroked his chin and stretched out his right hand. He saw a ball emitting 7-colored light appear in his hand. New chapter is coming soon. Chapter 1697, Inheritance of the Chaos Will. The Common People's Cauldron Strengthened. 2. This ball was none other than Aus mythical tier unique Lord Talent Sphere, the Kingdom of Chaos. He would be able to inherit a high-level Divine Kingdom faction, the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom, as long as he fused with this Lord Talent Sphere. At the same time, he would become the new Patriarch of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. An interesting Lord Talent Sphere. Especially since I'm the controller of the chaotic human tribe in the Crimson Great Cosmos. Looks like I have to help my main body unify the entire chaos human race today. Zhou 11 thought. Then, he didn't hesitate and directly chose to absorb the Lord Talent Sphere. A moment later, he had completely absorbed it. Then, lines of text appeared in front of him. Lord Talent Notification, congratulations, you can inherit all the inheritance of the Chaos Scarlet human race as your strength far exceeds the inheritance requirements. You are now the Patriarch of the Chaos Scarlet clan. You have now become a high-level Divine Kingdom Lord faction, the Lord of the Chaos Scarlet Divine Kingdom. It has been checked that you are the controller of the chaos human race in the Supreme Great Cosmos. Congratulations, you have completed the unification of the ancient chaos humans. The ancient power of chaos has awakened in your body, you have obtained the inheritance of the chaos willpower. Currently, you can activate the parts below the low-level Supreme Will realm. When your strength increases, you can activate the subsequent inheritance. Your Supreme Race Divine Artifact, the Common People's Cauldron, has awakened the power of the Chaos Will. Your Common People's Cauldron has awakened Racial Skill, Common People's Will. Race Divine Artifact Name, Common People's Cauldron, Equipment Grade, Race Divine Artifact Ability, Unification of All Life, Universal Race Divine Artifacts. Place the Race Divine Artifact of the people of foreign races in the Cauldron of All Life. After consuming a certain amount of luck, you can transform the divine artifact of the people of foreign races into a universal race divine artifact. The successfully transformed divine artifact of the people of foreign races will nourish your luck and augment your own forces. Note, the unification of all living beings can only be used once a day. Race Divine Artifact Ability, Live Suppression, gathers the power of all living beings and creates an earth-shattering sealing technique to suppress the enemy of the owner of the Common People's Cauldron. Currently, it can suppress and seal a low-level Supreme Willpower Realm Expert. Race Divine Artifact Ability, Live Suppression, gathers the power of all living beings and creates an earth-shattering sealing technique to suppress the enemy of the owner of the Common People's Cauldron. Currently, it can suppress and seal a low-level Supreme Willpower Realm Expert. Race Divine Artifact Description, Common People's Cauldron, also known as the Common People's Unification Cauldron. It's a race divine artifact exclusive to the Common People's Regal. It has the effect of changing the world and bathing the common people. Zhou 15 was shocked after reading it. The newly awakened divine artifact skill, live suppression, could actually mobilize the power of all the subjects under its command. It could at most suppress and seal a low-level Supreme Willpower Realm expert. That was a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. It could actually be suppressed and sealed by his race divine artifact. This is great. He finally had another offensive method that could have an effect on Supreme Willpower Realm experts. The effect of this skill was second only to the formless book in his hands. In the future, when he went out with this race divine artifact and the formless book, he would have a certain level of confidence even if he were to face an attack from a Supreme Willpower Realm expert. The only disadvantage was that the side effects of using the common people's suppression were a little too great. After using the common people's cauldron, the subjects under the owner of the common people's cauldron would actually enter an hour of weakness. He had too many subjects under him. Currently, it could even be said to be the Lord faction with the most subjects among all the Lord factions in the myriad worlds. The subjects under him were weakened for an hour, which was almost equivalent to the overall strength of the Supreme Great Cosmos decreasing by 1%. While this ratio was small, it was already quite shocking in the entire Supreme Great Cosmos. While the suppression of the common people is very strong, but use it as little as possible. However, you can't hesitate when you should be using it. The safety of the main body and the clone is the most important after all. It'll give more compensation to my subjects at worst. I believe the subjects will be willing to accept it. Zhou 15 thought. As the Scarlet Lord, he had the protection of the Crimson Overlord. This race divine artifact was almost useless. However, Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 were searching for the Chaos Divine Treasure in Tian Jun's corpse. They might encounter danger one day. There were more than one Supreme Will Realm expert there after all. They did not have any enemies that they were afraid of. They would be in danger if they encountered Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 and had a conflict. In addition, Zhou 13 and Zhou 14 were searching for ultimate void crystals and chaos divine treasures in the ultimate void cosmos. They were even in a more dangerous situation than Zhou 11 and Zhou 12. If that's the case, leave this race divine artifact to Zhou 11, Zhou 12, Zhou 13, and Zhou 14. Use it as you see fit. Leave this race divine artifact to Zhou 11, Zhou 12, Zhou 13, and Zhou 14. Use it as you see fit. Then, he threw it into the number 1 treasure vault. Anyone who needed it could just use it. In addition, the inheritance of the chaos will made Zhou 15 very excited. In addition, the inheritance of the chaos will made Zhou 15 very excited. It was not inferior to the will inheritance of the Supreme Will at all. Now that he had this inheritance, his chances of advancing to the Supreme Will realm in the future would be a little higher. Right at that moment, a soldier hurried in from outside. Chapter 1698, Inheritance of the Chaos Will. The Common People's Cauldron Strengthened. 3. Reporting to your Majesty, a chaotic scarlet human appeared outside. The other party called himself Lei Zhe and was the previous patriarch of the chaotic scarlet human race. Let him in. Zhou 15 said with an expected expression. Yes, Your Grace. The soldier said respectfully and left. Soon, a tall and strong elder one with grayish-white hair walked in from outside the hall and walked towards Zhou 15. His posture and aura did not look like he was submitting at all. Zhou 15 raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. He casually took out a cup of tea. He slowly released his coercion as he blew on the hot tea. In the eyes of Lei Zhe, the leader of the Chaos Scarlet clan, he just wanted to show off his strength to the new Chaos Scarlet clan patriarch and fight for his future status. However, he felt an incomparably terrifying pressure emanating from the other party just as he did this provocative action. This terrifying pressure was like a wave that constantly rushed towards his divine body, soul, and will. Every round of attacks increased the pressure on Lei Zhe. Soon, this pressure increased to a level that made Lei Zhe break out in cold sweat. Who is this new patriarch? Why do I feel a pressure from him that's not inferior to a top supreme god? Lei Zhe was shocked. However, he gritted his teeth and continued to persevere for the sake of himself. He tried his best to walk in Zhou 15's direction. And yet. 1 step. 2 steps. Lei Zhe gritted his teeth and wanted to take the 3rd step. However, he could no longer withstand the increasingly terrifying pressure before his foot landed. His entire divine body collapsed and knelt on the ground. Only then did Zhou 15 seem to notice Lei Zhe now. He raised his head and looked at Lei Zhe in surprise. The former patriarch of Lei Zhe. You're the previous patriarch of the Chaos Scarlet human race. Why are you bowing so respectfully to this emperor? Get up. He smiled faintly and said. Lei Zhe felt the pressure around him suddenly disappear. He looked at Zhou 15's calm smile and was indescribably shocked. He was a grade 1 supreme god. Just how strong was the succubus lord to be able to give he so much pressure? After a long time. Since His Majesty has already become the patriarch of the Chaos Scarlet clan, it's only right for me to follow the etiquette of a subject. He replied bitterly. The Scarlet humans of Chaos have been waiting for a powerful and intelligent existence like your Majesty to become our leader for a long, long time. Zhou 15 smiled. It seemed like this fellow did not know that the Chaos humans had already been unified. Lei Zhe. Zhou 15 said. I'm here. Lei Zhe said respectfully. Announce yourself as this emperor's subordinate. Zhou 15 said. Lei Zhe was stunned, not knowing what the succubus lord meant. Isn't he the other party's subordinate now? He hesitated for a moment before saying, Lei Zhe, the former patriarch of the Scarlet human race, am willing to become the succubus lord, no. Zhou 15 said, it is a subordinate of the common people's regal. Lei Zhe's pupils constricted. After a long time. He seemed to understand everything as, he slowly said in a deep voice, I, the former patriarch of the chaotic Scarlet human race, Lei Zhe, am willing to become a subordinate of the common people's regal. Zhou 15 nodded slightly. New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1699, Succubus God Lord. 1. As the Lord of Peace took effect, the former patriarch of the Chaos Scarlet human race, Lei Zhe, and the Chaos Scarlet human race under him officially became citizens of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Their loyalty immediately reached more than 90 points. Lei Zhe's expression became visibly fanatical when he looked at Zhou 15. The Chaos humans are finally united now. In the future, when this emperor's identity is exposed, lead your Chaos Scarlet human race to the supreme great cosmos and merge with the Chaos human race again. Zhou 15 said. Yes, Your Grace. Lei Zhe had no objections. They had not merged previously. Firstly, it was because of the era. Secondly, it was because there was no existence like Zhou 15 who could suppress an entire race alone. It had been too long since the era of the Chaos Will. The Supreme Will and Crimson Overlord gradually stopped paying attention to the chaotic human race in the two great cosmoses. Lei Zhe understood with Zhou 15's appearance. The time Zhou 15 mentioned was the best time for the Chaos humans to unify. Therefore, he was not afraid at all. I can't say no. Zhou 15 nodded slightly. Right at that moment. He suddenly sensed something and looked into the distance. He said, Lei Zhe, retreat first. As for the Chaos Scarlet human race, it's fine as long as they operate normally. Yes, Your Grace. Lei Zhe said respectfully. Next, it transformed into a bolt of chaotic lightning and disappeared into the air. When Zhou 15 saw this, he turned around and sat down on the throne, waiting for the guests to arrive. Soon, a dark purple figure flew over from the sky and landed at the entrance of the shrine in the blink of an eye, turning into a graceful and charming dark purple figure. Zhou 15 could not help but sigh seeing this existence in front of him. She's really beautiful. Even though she was inferior to him in terms of looks, she was already more beautiful than 99.9% of the living beings and god spirits. At this moment, this charming figure was also looking at Zhou 15 in surprise. He never expected that to happen. It had only been a short while, but this little fellow before him seemed to have undergone a tremendous change. He could not even see through this little fellow while standing here. How did he do it? What did I just experience? Too many doubts lingered in his mind. Just as he was about to say something, he saw two figures quickly fly in from outside the shrine and land on both sides of Zhou 15. They were Bai Yun and another subordinate of a grade 4 supreme god. At this moment, they looked at the other party coldly, as if they were about to start a fight if the other party offended them. This charming figure was very shocked by the two top supreme gods that suddenly appeared in front of the succubus lord, but she did not do anything sensitive. Don't be nervous. This is the head of our succubus clan. She won't harm this emperor. Zhou 15 smiled and said. At the same time, he pointed out the other party's identity. It was the patriarch of the succubus clan, the succubus god lord who could also be said to be the succubus divine ancestor. This was because his cultivation was that of a grade 1 supreme god. No wonder he could plead for leniency in front of Aus and spare the predecessor of his divine body. Zhou 15 thought to himself. Even though that was what he asked, he had no intention of making Bai Yun and them move aside. They still stood in front of they, separating them from the succubus god lord. The succubus god lord's expression froze, looking a little embarrassed. However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he tidied his expression and smiled. Noctil, congratulations. You finally defeated Aus and become the most qualified candidate to be the 5th Reserve Army of the Scarlet Lords. Zhou 15's expression was a little strange. What was there to congratulate for defeating such a weak Scarlet Lord? However, this was a comparison with the main body after all, so he naturally couldn't compare. Therefore, he said calmly, Lord God Lord Succubus, you flatter me. Then, he stopped talking. The succubus god lord was not embarrassed when she saw this. She turned around and said, since you've defeated Aus now, your previous promise is still valid. You're still the only succubus lord of our succubus race. Your divine kingdom can still be called the succubus divine kingdom. I can still support you from behind. He thought that Noctil would be very excited after he said this. This was the full support of a supreme god and an entire race after all. The benefits were self-evident. However, Zhou 15's reaction was beyond his expectations. That won't be necessary. Zhou 15 said indifferently, this emperor feels that even if this emperor doesn't rely on the succubus god race, this emperor can still live very well on his own. He can even fight for the spot in the 5th Reserve Army. The succubus god lord was stunned. This was different from what he had imagined. He was a supreme god, and a supreme god that carried the resources of the entire succubus race. Noctil was actually not tempted by such abundant resources. Then, he saw the two supreme gods in front of Noctil. He sensed the aura of a top supreme god emanating from the other party's body, and his expression gradually turned ugly. He got it. It must be the confidence these two top supreme gods gave Noctil since he was only a grade 1 supreme god after all. Even though he could not tell the strength of these two supreme gods on the surface, from the powerful aura emitted by them and the battle results of destroying several supreme gods previously, these two supreme gods probably had the terrifying strength of at least a grade 4 supreme god. Chapter 1700, Succubus God Lord. 2. With such strength and the terrifying power behind the other party, it was really possible that Noctil looked down on him and his succubus race. Not to mention that he had given up on her previously and even did not allow her to continue competing for the Scarlet Lord title as the Succubus Lord. When the Succubus God Lord thought of this, she knew that something was wrong. She seemed to have really offended the Succubus Lord. Under such circumstances, it was not easy to salvage the friendship between the two of them. However, who would have thought that a severely injured Scarlet Lord, whose Divine Kingdom Lord faction was about to collapse, would suddenly have the help of an expert to turn the tables. Now, he was the candidate most likely to become the 5th Reserve Army. If he had known about this, how could he have given up on Noctil? The Succubus God Lord opened her mouth, not knowing what to say to resolve the misunderstanding between them. When Zhou 15 saw he like this, he found it interesting. However, he didn't want to chat much with him, so he said, "Your Excellency, the God Lord of Succubus. You can leave now. This Emperor will continue to use the title of the Succubus Lord to compete for the Scarlet Lord position in the future." Zhou 15 did not say much for the rest. However, even so, the Succubus God Lord was still overjoyed. Since Noctil could say this, it meant that he did not take the conflict between the two to heart. The Succubus would be much more relaxed as long as this signal was there. As for how to build a good relationship with his son with a bright future in the future, or even bind them together, they could take it slow. There was no hurry. Okay. In addition, Succubus Lord. This is a small gift from me. It's my congratulatory gift to congratulate you for taking down AUS Chaotic Scarlet Divine Kingdom. I hope you can conquer more powerful enemies in the future and become the 5th Reserve of the Scarlet Supreme as soon as possible, or even become the true Scarlet Supreme. The Succubus God Lord said. At the same time, a world ring flew out of his arms and landed beside Zhou 15. Zhou 15 swept his gaze and nodded slightly. From what he could see, the treasures in the world ring were nothing. However, from the perspective of a grade 1 supreme god, this gift was already heavy enough. It would probably make the Succubus God Lord's heart ache for a while. That's good enough. In fact, he didn't really mind what the Succubus God Lord had done. The one suffering was the original body after all. What did it have to do with him? He would not take responsibility for everything. Now that the Succubus gods had taken out enough sincerity to compensate, Zhou 15, the beneficiary, cared even less. As for the Succubus God Lord, she did not say anything else. Afraid of arousing Noctil's impatience, she quickly bade farewell and left. Not long after the Succubus God Lord left, Bai Yun respectfully said, "Reporting to your Majesty, the allied Scarlet forces have returned and are ready to attack the other Scarlet forces with His Majesty at any time." Okay. Zhou 15 nodded and stood up. There's no time to lose. Let's start our war of conquest in the Crimson Great Cosmos now. Yes, Your Majesty. Bai Yun's eyes lit up. At the same time, they fought a war of conquest in the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos. Not many experts had been able to do such a feat since the establishment of the two universes. He was very proud to be able to do this with His Majesty. Then, the two gods of they did not waste any time. They immediately returned to the Succubus Divine Kingdom and led the army to start a war of conquest against the lords around the border with the Succubus Divine Kingdom as the center. Under the suppression of powerful troops and absolute peak combat strength, the territory of the Succubus Divine Kingdom began to expand at an astonishing speed. The scarlet domain where the sky and the ground were scarlet in all directions. At the highest point in the sky, a huge scarlet eye was closed. Suddenly, the scarlet eye suddenly opened. As this scarlet eye opened, a shocking scarlet violent storm immediately rose in the entire scarlet domain. Looking at the scarlet eye again, if the Supreme Will was here, he could see some doubts, shock, and anger in this scarlet eye. That idiot Aus. I just rewarded him not long ago, but this guy actually lost to another Scarlet Lord. Now, he even lost him status as a lord. D****. To think that I valued him so much. I didn't expect him to be such a weak fellow. I thought that he had a chance of obtaining a trace of the grace of the common people's regal. I guess I was wrong. The Crimson Overlord sighed. A successor like the common people's regal was indeed not something that could be obtained casually. Then, he thought of the Succubus Lord who had destroyed Aus, Succubus Lord. This little guy is interesting. He was clearly defeated by Aus not long ago and was even about to lose his life. His divine kingdom was also about to collapse. Now, not only did he rise again, he even destroyed Aus, who had the strength to compete for the 5th Reserve Army. What the hell is going on? The Crimson Overlord was puzzled. He had not been paying attention to the fight for supremacy among the Scarlet Lords in his great cosmos. Instead, he had been paying attention to the ultimate void great cosmos and the illusionist clan. Therefore, he did not know much about what happened in his great cosmos. Fortunately, it's not too late to make up for it now. He had a thought. Everything that had happened in the entire Crimson Great Cosmos during this period of time quickly returned to his sea of consciousness. The Crimson Overlord easily accepted everything. However, he did not pay attention to anything else. His attention was all on what had happened to the Succubus Lord during this period of time, especially after she was defeated by Aus. Soon, he understood what had happened. On the way back from his serious injuries, he accidentally encountered 2 Grade 4 Supreme Gods. These 2 Grade 4 Supreme Gods were born in the era of the Chaos Will. Furthermore, they have a feud with the Chaos Will and the Chaos Humans under him. They saw that the long decimated Chaos and the Scarlet Humans actually showed signs of rising again in this era, so they felt indignant and uneasy. They want to stop the rise of the Chaos Scarlet Lords, but due to the rules I set, they can't directly join the Scarlet Lord War. Then, they noticed Noctil, the Scarlet Lord who dared to challenge Aus. They have decided to join Noctil and work for him to help him eliminate Aus and the Chaos Scarlet Gods. I see. I can't believe there's such a history. The Crimson Overlord nodded in its heart. In the era of the Chaos Will, the Chaos Humans indeed had many powerful enemies. Now that the Chaos Humans were showing signs of rising again, it was normal for the powerhouses among the enemies not to want them to rise again. Still, something just doesn't feel right, the Crimson Overlord muttered to himself. He carefully watched Noctil's experiences during this period a few times. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed slightly. In the sky of the Reincarnation Sacred Palace of the Blazing Sun Divine Capital. In the Reincarnation Sacred Palace. Zhou Zhou was sitting cross-legged on the Tao Comprehension futon, comprehending the Lord's laws. He only slowly opened his eyes after a long time. He then sighed. As expected of the inheritance of the Chaos Will. Even if I can only understand the content below the low-level Supreme Will realm now, it's enough for me to benefit greatly. With the help of the Holy Scripture of the Heart and other supplementary cultivation treasures, I feel like I'm not far from the Grade 3 Supreme God realm. The level of my will is also beginning to approach the level of the Quasi-Supreme Will. Zhou Zhou was very satisfied with his cultivation process. He could sense that he was not far from the Supreme Will realm. Even if his current strength was only that of a Grade 2 Supreme God, he could already see the dawn of becoming a supreme willpower realm expert. Chapter 1701, War Summary. 1. At this moment, his personal terminal suddenly rang. He looked over and tapped gently. He saw his personal terminal trembled slightly before an icon was projected in front of him. It was the summary of today's war. Currently, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom has a total of 3 large battlefields and 1 small battlefield. The main forces and god spirits of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom were fighting on these 4 battlefields, conquering more and more territory and resources for the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. The first battlefield was the Supreme Great Cosmos battlefield. Most of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's main army was fighting in the Supreme Great Cosmos. Their main battlefield was on the Supreme Great Cosmos. Currently, 3/5 of the entire continent was in Zhou Zhou's hands. As long as he conquered 2/5 of the remaining continent, the entire high continent would belong to Zhou Zhou. Zhou Zhou could not help but feel emotional looking at this. The high continent is certainly big enough. With his main combat army, conquering hundreds or even thousands of boundless universes in a day would not be a problem. However, even with such powerful strength, it still took such a long time to conquer so many territories in the face of the highest continent. From this, it could be seen how large the highest continent was. As for the second battlefield, it was the Crimson Great Cosmos battlefield that had just been opened today. The strength of the Crimson Great Cosmos was not inferior to the high continent at all. In fact, because the Crimson Great Cosmos followed the law of survival of the fittest, there were more lord factions and top-notch god spirits here, and their average strength was stronger. Zhou Zhou liked this second battlefield very much. It reminded Zhou Zhou of the Ultimate Void battleground. During those days in the Ultimate Void battleground, although the environment there was rather boring, it had to be said that there were really many experts there. With the help of the Ultimate Void race experts, the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom grew rapidly. All kinds of god spirits, true god tiers, master god tiers, and supreme gods could be born one after another. Even though the war in the Ultimate Void battleground had come to an end, he saw a new hope in the Scarlet Universe. He had already made plans. In the future, he would send more and more Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom soldiers and god spirits into the Crimson Great Cosmos. On one hand, he would conquer the territory of the Crimson Great Cosmos and harvest its resources. On the other hand, he would use the Crimson Great Cosmos as his training ground. This way, the soldiers under him could grow rapidly with the help of the Scarlet Life Form. Moreover, there was another benefit in the Crimson Great Cosmos. The Crimson Great Cosmos did not have so many complicated relationships that Zhou Zhou had to pay attention to. Let's just do it. Unlike the Supreme Great Cosmos, all kinds of relationships were intertwined. Before the battle, Zhou Zhou had to investigate the other party's background, afraid that he would hit a lord faction that had no conflict of interest with him. For example, the 2 Supreme Will-level factions, the Sun Divine Court and the Great Lunar Divine Court. These 2 major factions not only operated forces beside the Supreme Will, but they also had many forces distributed in the High Continent and even the entire myriad worlds. They were subordinate departments. Zhou Zhou had no intention or time to interact with these 2 factions for the time being. Therefore, when conquering the High Continent, he would deliberately avoid the subordinate departments of these 2 factions. Fortunately, the subordinate departments of these 2 factions were all non-lord factions. Their positions were neutral, so it did not affect Zhou Zhou's conquest of the entire High Continent. As for the third battlefield, it was where Zhou 11 and Zhou 12 headed to Tian Jun's corpse today. There were a large number of supreme gods and even a small number of supreme willpower experts there. It was an excellent place for top-notch god spirits to increase their strength and collect resources. Zhou Zhou attached great importance to that place and regarded it as his third battlefield. As for the last small battlefield, it was the ultimate void great cosmos that Zhou 13 and Zhou 14 had gone to. The ultimate void great cosmos was mysterious and complicated. Even if they were very strong, it was very easy for them to encounter stronger enemies. However, they had more freedom of movement and were not restricted by the spatial venue. Therefore, Zhou Zhou called Zhou 13 and Zhou 14's locations as small battlefields. The word small naturally means small. It's not small. On the other hand, on the last small battlefield of the three major battlefields, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army in avatars had eliminated more than 500 billion god spirits, more than 600 million true god tiers, more than 400,000 master god tiers, more than 400 supreme gods, and 15 quasi-supreme willpower realm experts. Zhou Zhou's eyes lit up when he saw the statistics. Not bad, not bad. Unexpectedly, after leaving the ultimate void battleground, the number of enemies they eliminated every day did not decrease, but instead increased. He carefully looked at the data before understanding. As for the increase in the number of Master God tier, Supreme Gods, and quasi-supreme willpower experts, most of them came from the place where Tian Jun's corpse was. A small portion came from the enemies that Zhou 13 and Zhou 14 had dealt with along the way in the ultimate void great cosmos. Zhou Zhou nodded in satisfaction. It was a blessing in disguise. Even though he had lost the ultimate void battleground, he had found a better place to train his troops. With the existence of these four battlefields, the growth of his soldiers would definitely be greatly accelerated. New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1702, War Summary. 2. Then, he continued reading. With the combined efforts of the four battlefields, the statistics were as follows. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had obtained a total of about 8,000 capital units worth of mist cores, origin crystals, skill books, equipment, and basic materials. 18 capital units, 2,837,189,143,871,823 green bronze tier Lord Talent crystal fragments. 3,588 units of Chaos Divine Treasure. 47,871,182 legendary tier and below Lord Talent spheres. A large number of Lord Talent crystal fragments of other levels. There were also 2 Guy Unit 1,323 capital units 2,381,817,350 million units of divine crystals from low tier to high tier deity level. 5,239,817,332,341 true God tier divine crystals. 3,231,134,714,378 Master God tier divine crystals. 232,119,273 Grade 1 to Grade 3 Supreme God divine crystals. 25 capital units had 23,310,827,314 lesser gods to high tier deity level divine artifacts. 42,229,380,000 true God tier divine artifacts. 61,199,027 Master God tier divine artifacts. 313,821 Supreme God divine artifacts. There were about 30 capital units with a total of 2,389,880 million divine spark fragments, God tier medicinal herbs, God tier ingredients, God tier ores, God tier blueprints, and other treasures. 5,239,129,372,637 Master God tier medicinal herbs, God tier ingredients, God tier ores, God tier blueprints, and other treasures. 3,122,371 Supreme God-level God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures. In terms of insight defection, Zhou Zhou's clones had used the 2 insight defection skills of Land of Earth, a minister of the king, and son of destiny to instigate a total of 1 Guy unit 5,123 capital unit soldier, 11,523,982,913 low-tier deity-level god spirits, 5,023,912 mid-tier deity-level god spirits, 3,023,712,387 high-tier deity-level god spirits, 1,528,273 true gods, 162,381 master gods, and 35 supreme gods. In addition, the Lords of the Star Alliance had also incite defection 2,302 capital unit soldiers, more than 12,415,000,000 god spirits, more than 7 million true god tiers, and 1,281 lord gods. In the end, in terms of the advancement of god spirits, there were a total of 112,329,884,328 legendary tier advanced grade soldiers who had been promoted to low-tier deity-level elementary grade god spirits. There were also 2,418,237 high-tier deity-level advanced grade god spirits who had advanced to true god-tier elementary grade god spirits. Another 6,211 top-notch true gods of the human race and 32,937 top-notch true gods of the people of foreign races felt their master god tier bottleneck and applied to enter the reincarnation sacred palace to cultivate in seclusion in an attempt to break through to the master god tier realm. Moreover, there were 10 High Lord advanced grade god spirits who had sensed the bottleneck in their advancement and were also preparing to enter the reincarnation sacred palace today to advance to a grade 1 supreme god. Zhou Zhou's original military strength was 22 Guy units 8,022 capital units 2,387,256,523,743,888 soldiers, 800,448,029,218 god spirits, 14,488,119,388 true god tiers, 294,802 master gods and 196 supreme gods, and 1 quasi-supreme willpower realm expert. Now, with the addition of these divine spirit experts who had instigated the incite defection and the 5 supreme gods and 15 master gods recruited from the chaotic mystic realm, the military strength under him had reached 1 Guy unit 1010 capital units 731, 283, 1272, 978 soldiers. 248,573,699,994 god spirits, 7,357,117,439 true gods, 82,997 master gods, and 53 supreme gods. After reading it, a smile appeared on Zhou Zhou's face. Even though there was no ultimate void battleground. However, with these 4 battlefields, the speed at which his soldiers advanced didn't decrease. Instead, it increased. Especially at the Master God tier, Supreme God, and Quasi-Supreme Willpower Realm experts, there was even more breakthrough progress. The number of Master God tier exceeded 300,000. The number of Supreme Gods exceeded 200. Even the number of Quasi-Supreme Willpower elites had increased from 1 to 6. The most important reason for the explosive increase in the number of experts at these 3 levels was the location of Tian Jun's corpse. That place was indeed a treasure land suitable for Master God tier and Supreme Gods to train. Most of the Master God tiers under him, who were about to break through to the Supreme God level, came from Tian Jun's corpse. In the future, they'll have to send more Master God tier and Supreme God level experts to Tian Jun's corpse. In this way, with the special training environment of Tian Jun's corpse, I will definitely be able to obtain more new Supreme Gods. Zhou Zhou thought to himself. In addition to the above war summary, in terms of purchasing Chaos Divine treasures in the Chaos Sea, the management of the Chaos Sea today bought 220 units of Chaos Divine treasures from the Divine Kingdom Lord factions that were collecting Chaos Divine treasures in the Time Ruins. He originally had 2,890 units of Chaos Divine treasures. Now, with these 220 units of Chaos Divine treasures and the 3,588 units of Chaos Divine treasures obtained from other battlefields, it added up to 6,698 units of Chaos Divine treasures. Advancing to a Grade 1 Supreme God territory required 10,000 units of Chaos Divine treasures. He had already gathered 2/3 of it. Zhou was still very satisfied. With Tian Jun's corpse as a new source of Chaos Divine treasures, the collection of Chaos Divine treasures was much faster than before. Even if I can't find a single unit of Chaos Divine treasure in the Ultimate Void battleground, I'm not worried anymore. With Tian Jun's corpse, I don't need the Chaos Divine treasure from the Ultimate Void battleground anymore. A smile appeared on Zhou's face. However, after some thought, he still contacted Lord of 10,000 Evils. It wasn't that he cared about the Chaos Divine treasure. He simply wanted to know how the Ultimate Void battlefield was doing. Soon, his personal terminal projected a virtual projection of Lord of 10,000 Evils. Big Brother. The Lord of 10,000 Evils was very excited that his big brother could take the initiative to contact him. Brother Demon Lord, how are things on your side? As Zhou asked this question, he was also paying attention to the background behind Lord of 10,000 Evils. Then, he raised his brows slightly. This was because he had seen many god spirits fighting. All the god spirits from the lesser gods to the powerhouses of the Supreme Willpower realm were fighting a bloody battle without exception. Both sides seemed to have gone crazy, causing each other to die. They did not even pay attention to their own defense. Apart from that, Zhou could also tell that the soldiers on the Supreme Will's side seemed to have a huge advantage. Therefore, even though they were fighting with all their might, their desperation revealed a sense of calmness. As for the Ultimate Void race, they were really fighting with their lives on the line. They killed 1,000 enemies and suffered 800 losses. It was a crazy battle between trapped beasts. What is going on? He had also fought with the Ultimate Void race many times. Wasn't this how the Ultimate Void race fought? From the looks of the battlefield behind you, did something happen to the Ultimate Void clan? It looks like they're fighting crazily. Zhou asked. Big Brother's right. Lord of 10,000 Evils smiled and said, the Ultimate Void race has indeed encountered a major event like the collapse of the sky. That's why they fought so recklessly. Because, their king, the Void Emperor has already fallen. Killed by our Lord Supreme Will. When Lord of 10,000 Evils said this, he immediately straightened his back, feeling rather honored. Then, he looked at Zhou's shocked expression and continued smugly, after killing the Void Emperor, the Supreme will completely shut off the Ultimate Void battleground and ordered us to eliminate all the Ultimate Void races in the Ultimate Void battleground. After this battle, there's a high chance that the Ultimate Void clan will be exterminated. The remaining members of the Ultimate Void clan wandering in the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos will not be able to make a name for themselves. Before long, they will be completely wiped out by the other multiverse forces in the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos. Zhou was shocked the entire time. The Void Emperor was actually destroyed by the Supreme Will. How long has it been? Was the Void Emperor that invulnerable to attacks? He was in existence with the same will after all. How did he die in just a day? Or could it be that the Supreme Will was that strong? So strong that there was a gap in strength between him and the other willpower powerhouses? Zhou fell into deep thought. He did not question the Lord of 10,000 Evils' words. Since he said that the Supreme Will had killed the Void Emperor must have really died. It couldn't be fake. I'll make a trip to the ultimate void battleground. Zhou blurted out. He was stunned after saying that. Why did he suddenly say such a thing? New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1703, Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. 1. Big Brother, are you coming to the ultimate void battleground? The Lord of 10,000 Evil's eyes lit up when he heard this. He immediately smiled and said, then I'll hold a banquet tomorrow and let us brothers have a good gathering. Zhou's expression did not change on the surface, but his heart was already in turmoil. He did not reply to Lord of 10,000 Evils at all. There was only one thought in his mind. Why did I say this out of the blue? It was as if his instincts were driving him to say this. Weird. What a strange feeling. This was the first time Zhou had experienced such a thing. He recalled the various bloodline inheritances in his mind with a slightly gloomy expression, wanting to find out the reason for this inexplicable behavior. In the end, he discovered that there were many reasons for such behavior. For example, charm-type abilities, fate-type abilities, control-type abilities, curse-type abilities. Among all kinds of abilities, there were many methods to control life forms to say something. But he was a Grade 2 Supreme God. Moreover, it was a Supreme God whose combat power was comparable to a top-notch quasi-supreme willpower realm expert. Even if a true supreme willpower realm expert came before, he also had the ability to save his life. An existence at his level no longer had any means at the same level that could forcefully control he to do what he had just done. Unless there was a supreme willpower expert or even a willpower expert secretly taking action. However, in the Supreme Great Cosmos, who would dare to tamper with the Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army under the eyes of the Supreme Will? Who could do such a thing? Did they really think that the Supreme Will was a pushover? He was someone who could kill a Void Emperor as easily as killing a chicken. Even the Crimson Overlord might not be able to do that. What the hell is going on? Zhou's heart sank. Dude, what's up? The Lord of 10,000 Evils finally faintly realized that his big brother's mood was not quite right and asked worriedly. It's okay. I just thought of something. Zhou came back to his senses and said to the Lord of 10,000 Evils. The Lord of 10,000 Evils nodded. He could tell that he was hiding something from him. However, since he didn't want to tell him, he couldn't ask further. Furthermore, he believed that with his brother's abilities, since he didn't ask for help, there was a high chance that he could resolve it on his own. At this moment, a new idea appeared in Zhou's mind. Since he had just bafflingly mentioned that he would personally make a trip to the ultimate void battlefield. In that case, he might as well make a trip there and see what was going on there that would make him say this uncontrollably. Of course, he would not let his main body go. Instead, he would send a clone to the ultimate void battleground to see what was going on. Lord Supreme Will, are you still in the ultimate void battleground? Zhou suddenly asked. The main body is no longer here. The Lord of 10,000 Evils said, however, Lord Supreme Will left a clone to supervise the situation here. That was because the Void Emperor had just been killed by the Supreme Will. The Supreme Will was also afraid that after he left, the ultimate Void race would suddenly use some transcendent level trump card to destroy the battlefield, so he left this clone behind. Zhou nodded. He heaved another sigh of relief. Since the Supreme Will had left a clone behind, he would be even more daring to send a clone to the ultimate void battlefield. There shouldn't be any accidents on this trip with the Supreme Will's clone here. Since Big Brother is coming tomorrow, he'll collect the ultimate void crystals and chaos divine treasures in the sacred zone today. When Big Brother comes tomorrow, he'll give them to you directly. The Lord of 10,000 Evils said. Okay. Zhou Zhou nodded. Then, Zhou Zhou chatted with the Lord of 10,000 Evils for a while before hanging up. Then, Zhou Zhou returned to the reincarnation sacred palace and continued cultivating. The next day, Zhou Zhou slowly opened his eyes. He felt the surging divine power in his body and the increasingly refined divine spark, and a smile appeared on his face. Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. He felt the surging divine power in his body and the increasingly refined divine spark, and a smile appeared on his face. Such progress could be said to be terrifying. Then, with a thought, he brought up the various law skills he had learned after advancing to the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. The first was the King that was used the most frequently. Law skill name, King, Law skill quality, Grade 3 Supreme God Realm, Introduction. As a Grade 2 Supreme God on the Lord's Law path, you can mark 100% of the territorial subjects and control everything they have, including appearance, bloodline, skills, weapons, law skills, and even illusory fate. When you control everything the marked subject has, the subject doesn't have to suffer any negative effects. Zhou Zhou nodded in satisfaction after reading it. The multiplier increased from 10 to 20 times. It directly doubled. This also meant that his strength had doubled again. His strength had already reached a level infinitely close to the Supreme Will realm. He was twice as strong as before. Even though he still couldn't reach the level of unmatched will, he was even closer. Beating up 100 quasi-supreme willpower realm experts was child's play with his current strength after using King. Then, he looked at the second law skill, Myriad Method Star Palm. New chapter is coming soon, write a review. Chapter 1704, Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. 2. The improvement of the Myriad Method Star Palm was the same as before. It was purely an increase in power. Its power had also increased by 10 times. Zhou Zhou even had the thought of exchanging blows with a true Supreme Willpower Realm expert coupled with King whose power had also increased. As for the third law skill, Under the Heavens, everything is the King's land. Its domain strength has also increased again. Currently, it could already weaken the effect of 1/10 of the will domain of a Supreme Will Realm existence. As for domains below the Supreme Will Realm, there was naturally no need to mention them. It was a complete suppression. In addition, the law skill All the land in the world belongs to the King could establish 200 temporary/permanent exclusive territories at the boundless universe level in the law domain when he was a Grade 2 Supreme God. The number had risen to 500. Finally, the Grade 2 Supreme God All the land in the world belongs to the King could forcefully make 200 boundless universes his territory every day. The number had also risen to 500. The improvement of this ability could undoubtedly greatly increase the speed and efficiency of his Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's expansion of its territory every day. As for the coast of Earth, could it be that the effect of Wang Chen's law skill was to instantly change the thoughts and wills of the life forms in the domain by consuming half of the supreme divine power in their bodies after casting the domain, turning into subjects loyal to them? Previously, when it was a Grade 2 Supreme God law skill, it could only incite Grade 2 Supreme Gods and subjects below. Now, he could instigate the incite defection subjects below Grade 3 Supreme God realm and below. Finally, there was the fifth law skill, the 95 Supreme King. Law skill name, 95 Supreme King, Law skill quality, Grade 3 Supreme God realm, Introduction to Nomological skills. You are standing at the peak of all lords. You are the King of Lords, the Absolute Supreme. When you face other lords and they are enemies with you, all the abilities that they use against you will be weakened by 30%. There is a 30% chance that they will be ineffective. Your subjects' combat strength has increased by 300% when they fight with you. Other lords will have a natural sense of reverence and even submission when facing you. There is a certain chance that the other party will agree to your opinions and thoughts. Those who are your enemies will feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. Only those with extremely strong willpower will be immune to this fear. You can transform into the 95 Supreme King Dragon God. Your body is invincible and indestructible. Unless all the soldiers under you die or the difference in strength between you and the other party is so great that it can't be made up for, you will definitely not die. When you transform into the 95 Supreme King Dragon God and appear on the battlefield, you will randomly give your soldiers the supreme blessing to strengthen their various abilities. Zhou nodded in satisfaction after reading it. The effects of the 95 Supreme King's nomological skills had also doubled. The most obvious improvement was that this law skill doubled the combat strength of the subjects under him. Not bad, not bad. His 5 law skills did not disappoint him. Then, he looked at his newly upgraded Supreme Unique Lord Talent. Lord Talent, Permitha Sacred Boat, Supreme, Unique, Permitha Sacred Boat. Your territory has a general purpose race divine artifact, the Permitha Sacred Boat. The Permitha Sacred Boat was born at the birth of the law of life. Its purpose of existence was to bring all the living beings of the worlds away from the world that was about to be destroyed when they were in danger of being destroyed and head to the new shore of life. Specific Lord Talent Effect 1, Permitha's Gratitude. The Lord who owns the Permitha Sacred Boat and the subjects under his command will have 2 unlimited chances to revive after death every day. Specific Lord Talent Effect 2, Indestructible by myriad tribulations. The lords and subjects under the control of the Permitha Sacred Boat will have an indestructible moment of 1 second per day. Any calamity, even a supreme willpower expert, will not be able to kill a living being in the indestructible state. Specific Lord Talent Effect 3, Longevity Prolongation. The life essence of the Lord and the subjects under him who own the Permitha Sacred Boat has been greatly improved. Not only is he healthy, strong, and powerful, but his recovery ability has also greatly increased. His mental recovery ability has greatly increased, his reaction speed has greatly increased, his reproduction ability has greatly increased, life form lifespan has greatly increased, and so on. Specific Lord Talent Effect 4, Permitha Journey. The Permitha Sacred Boat can ignore any calamity and will never be damaged. The living beings inside the Permitha Sacred Boat can also resist all calamities below the Supreme God level in the final will calamity. Specific Lord Talent Effect 5, Undying Altar. By spending a certain amount of mist cores, divine crystals, faith divine crystals, and other valuable currencies, you can revive all life forms below the Supreme God level. After reading it, Zhou nodded in satisfaction. As the mythical tier Unique Lord Talent, the Supreme Unique Lord Talent of the Life Arc did not disappoint him. The effects of its Lord Talent in all aspects had greatly increased. Especially when it comes to resurrection. The kindness of the Otherworld Heavenly King allowed him and his subjects to have 2 unlimited opportunities to revive after death every day. The last effect, the Undying Altar, could revive all life forms below the Supreme God level by spending a certain amount of mist cores, divine crystals, faith divine crystals, and other valuable currencies. From then on, if he wanted to revive the Supreme God, he would no longer need to seek help from the reincarnation will. Even though the reincarnation will was considered one of them, when it came to others, there was no one who had the ability to deal with him. In addition, Talent Effect 2, Immortality, Talent Effect 3, Longevity, Talent Effect 4, each of them had their own uses during the journey to the Nirvana realm. Almost none of the talent effects were useless or overlapped with the talent abilities that he had mastered. Zhou was very satisfied. Then, he closed the Lord Talent Information Interface and stood up to leave the Reincarnation Sacred Palace. He came to Mugu's residence. After drinking tea with Mugu for a while, a golden stream of light flew out of the Scarlet Broodmother and landed on the ground, revealing Wu Xin's figure. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Wu Xian said respectfully. Then, he took out 3 rings and handed them to Zhou. "These are my gains from the Scarlet Broodmother. Please take a look, Your Majesty." Zhou took it and checked it. After confirming that there were no problems, he handed the class change certificate to Wuxia and asked him to find a reserve recruit to change his class to Supreme God Realm Soldier and Supreme Holy Mage God. As for Zhou, he left Mugus residence and flew out of the Divine Kingdom world, arriving at the Gate of Summoning. Then, he called over a Master God Tier Advanced Grade Eternal Battleship as usual. Then, he threw all 2 Guy unit recruitment books into the Gate of Summoning. Finally, he spent 100 Master God Tier Advanced Grade Divine Crystals to recruit they in one go and arranged for they to be on this eternal battleship. Then, he spent another 100 Master God Tier Advanced Grade Divine Crystals to summon 66,666,600 pure-blooded dragons. They were also placed on another eternal mothership. Then, Zhou spent another 100 Master God Tier Advanced Grade Divine Crystals to summon today's subject. This time, he summoned more than 7 billion subjects. He summoned more than 6 billion subjects than usual. Then, he got his subordinates to arrange the whereabouts of these new soldiers and new subjects before heading to the Jade Capital Immortal Mountain alone. After spending 1,000 low-tier deity-level elementary grade divine crystals, he summoned 100 capital units heavenly soldiers, heavenly generals, and heavenly venerates. At this point, all the soldier types for today had been recruited and changed. Right at that moment. Swish, 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 swish. A total of 39,148 light pillars of various laws soared into the sky from the direction of the Reincarnation Sacred Palace. It was the advancement phenomenon of the 39,148 new Master God Tiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Shortly after, another 10 completely different starry sky phenomena appeared in the sky filled with stars. These 10 abnormal phenomena were all different. Each of them emitted an extremely terrifying might. It was the advancement phenomenon of the 10 newly advanced supreme gods. Chapter 1705, Total Military Force. Bodhi Supreme's Method. 1. All the god spirits in the myriad worlds saw the advancement phenomenon of the 10 supreme gods. Compared to them, the advancement phenomenon of nearly 40,000 master gods seemed a little ordinary. Even though master gods were also top-notch experts, they were actually not rare. As experts one level higher than master god tier, the number of supreme gods was limited. There were only 10,000 supreme gods in the entire supreme great cosmos. 10 supreme gods were born in one day. Other than the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord personally creating the Supreme God, such a situation had never happened in other historical periods. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had really set a record this time. After the initial shock, the experts of the Myriad Races Combat Channel and the Myriad Races Lord Channel immediately began to discuss this matter crazily. 10 Supreme Gods were born at the same time. As a veteran Supreme God, I can only say that I'm inexperienced. I've never heard or seen anything like it. I've really learned something this time. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom is awesome. The Common People's Regal is awesome. Common People's Regal is too powerful. He relied on his own strength to increase the peak combat strength of the Supreme Great Cosmos by 0.1%. Exaggerated. The Supreme Great Cosmos is really blessed to have a lord like Common People's Regal. Isn't that too much? Isn't it just 10 Grade 1 Supreme Gods? Overdoing it? Let me put it this way. The things that you've said are overdoing it. Even God King Heaven Punishment, Spring and Autumn Dharma Lord, and Lord of 10,000 Evils, the 3 Supreme Lord Reserves, have never done it. Is they unwilling to do it? They can't do it. As far as I know, 1,000,000 years ago, the Spring and Autumn Dharma Lord used the power of the River of Time to create 3 supreme god subordinates in a day. However, I heard that after that incident, the Spring and Autumn Dharma Lord seemed to have suffered some taboo backlash from the River of Time. From then on, the Spring and Autumn Dharma Lord no longer used the River of Time to forcefully create the supreme god. The common people's regal must have a unique method to create top-notch experts. If the common people's regal contributes his method to create experts, wouldn't our supreme great cosmos be able to take off quickly? I strongly suggest that the common people's regal contributes his method to nurture experts. If the common people's regal isn't selfish, he must think that there's nothing wrong with what I said, right? Where did this idiot come from? How can he say such shameless words? Why don't you contribute your cultivation resources and let more cultivators break through in our supreme great cosmos? You have evil intentions and want to disgust our common people's regal, your excellency, right? I also suggest that we investigate this guy immediately. I suspect that he has malicious intentions towards our supreme great cosmos. He might be a spy planted in our supreme great cosmos by the Illusionist clan or the Ultimate Void clan. Heh, everyone, don't worry. I've already found the Holy Lord of Divination and got to divine this fellow's location. After confirming the location, I'll immediately bring my good friend to look for him. I've already contacted the Demon God Department of the Sun Divine Court. It won't be long before we find that guy. When the time comes, we'll publicly execute him. Does he really think that the channel is a lawless place? He dares to say anything. You guys are too much. Do you have to do this? When you find a place, call me. I'm good at long-distance fishing. Dog head, the deities discussed animatedly. Many god spirits saw the farces in these discussions. On one hand, they lamented that there were all kinds of birds in the forest. On the other hand, they were secretly shocked by the prestige of the common people's regal. This prestige came not only from the fact that the common people's regal was the Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army, but also from the fact that the common people's regal had nurtured many supreme gods. He had status, strength, and powerful subordinates. He also had a good reputation in the myriad worlds. Many merits were gathered on common people's regal alone. This made his prestige among the god spirits almost unparalleled. This could be seen from the fact that god spirits badmouthed him or harbored ill intentions towards the common people's regal and immediately attracted other god spirits to attack him together. God King Heaven Punishment and Dharma Lord Spring and Autumn had such prestige in the past. However, it was a famous scene that only happened after he became a Supreme Lord Reserve Army for a long time. And now, the common people's regal had just become the Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army and already had such prestige. It was unbelievable. In the high-level Divine Kingdom channel, the subjects of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom were also discussing the birth of 10 new supreme gods in the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. However, compared to the gods of the outside world, the subjects of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom were much calmer. They had long been used to His Majesty's various miraculous achievements. Therefore, even though they also felt honored that the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had given birth to 10 supreme gods, on the surface, everyone was all smiles, as if this was a daily occurrence. Of course, only they knew how excited they were. The advancement phenomena dissipated. 39,148 light pillars of various laws and 10 especially huge light pillars of laws soared into the sky from the reincarnation sacred palace after all. Then, they flew towards Zhou and quickly landed in front of him. It was the newly promoted Master God and the newly promoted Supreme God. They immediately knelt down and thanked Zhou respectfully after they arrived. Chapter 1706, Total Military Force. Bodhi Supreme's Method. 2. Zhou Zhou waved his hand and smiled as he spoke to them for a while. Then he gave them a set of divine artifacts that suited them. Then he looked at the 10 new Master God tiers. When he saw that among the 10 newly advanced Master Gods were the original Master God tier, Machina Master God, Wisdom Master God, and Di Huang, the 4 newly advanced Supreme Gods, he nodded inwardly. That's it. 9 of the 10 Master God tiers who had joined the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had finally become Supreme Gods. This time, he had fulfilled his promise to them. The only one left was the chaotic God race patriarch, the Heaven Curse Beast. That fellow had long been suppressed by the Supreme Will, so Zhou Zhou naturally did not need to care about it. Congratulations. Zhou Zhou said with a smile to the original Master God tier and the other 10 former Master Gods. The original Master God tier and the other 4 newly promoted Supreme Gods, as well as the Goddess of Life and the other Supreme Gods who had advanced earlier, all stood up and thanked Zhou Zhou respectfully. Your Majesty, all of our achievements today are thanks to Your Majesty. Please accept another bow from us. This favor will never be repaid. We will definitely devote our lives to the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. They said in unison. Zhou Zhou smiled and nodded. Then, he opened their information panel and found that their loyalty had indeed all become Holy Spirit tier believers. Zhou Zhou nodded in satisfaction. This kind of loyal, capable, eloquent, and grateful subordinate was likable. Then, he chatted with they for a while longer before asking they to look for Jing Yuanqi to collect their duties and worshipped God Spirit salaries. Zhou Fight then calculated the strength of his main combat army. His original military strength was 24 Gai units, 5,447 capital units, 2,376,643,712,912,387 soldiers, 832,434,636,889 God spirits, 16,001,037 true gods, 312,464 supremacy gods, 236 supreme gods, and 6 quasi-supreme willpower realm. Including the 20 Gai unit recruits who were recruited and changed jobs today, there were 66,666,660,000 pure-blooded dragons, 100 capital units heavenly soldiers, 16,610 newly advanced master gods, and 6 newly advanced supreme gods. The troops under him had already reached 44 Gai units, 5,547 capital units, 2,376,709,712,912,387 soldiers, 8,331,636,889 God spirits, 22. 6,007,037 true gods, 351,612 supremacy gods, 246 supreme gods, and 6 quasi-supreme willpower realm. Zhou Zhou nodded slightly after reading it. Then, he sensed the lower limit of the potential of the Blazing Sun God race's citizens. There were still no changes to the mid-tier deity level advance grade. However, he originally needed 45,813 newly advanced Master God tiers to advance the Blazing Sun God race to the lower limit of the high-tier deity level elementary grade. Now that he had these new Master God tiers today, he needed 39,602 new Master God tiers to advance to the lower limit of the high-tier deity level elementary grade. The speed at which the Blazing Sun God race's potential increased began to slow down. However, Zhou Zhou was not in a hurry. How long had he been developing? What was he so anxious about? Furthermore, he knew very well. True God tiers, Master God tiers, and Supreme Gods under him would increase in the future as he could now recruit 20 Gai unit epic tier advanced grade soldiers every day, the number of God spirits. This was the huge effect of having a large base. Therefore, his speed of raising the lower limit of his potential had slowed down. However, it's only temporary. As he continued to develop, the speed and number of God spirits born under him would become more and more terrifying. It was not impossible to raise the lower limit of the blazing sun god race's potential to the high-tier deity level. It was not impossible to raise it to the true god tier or even the master god tier level. At the same time, Joe Marshall had already brought Thanatos, Nazario, and 10,000 master god tier advanced grade god spirits to the Chaos Sea. They quickly found the spacetime chaotic divine demon and discovered that there were a total of 415 chaotic divine demons beside the 4 chaotic divine demons. Joe Marshall's eyes lit up. This time, the number of Chaos Fiend Celestials that they brought over was nearly twice as many as the last time. He immediately brought the god spirits to them. After a few simple words, he gave the spacetime chaotic divine demon 1,660 master god tier divine artifacts. He then wiped out the 415 chaotic divine demons with a single palm strike. After extracting the loots, he obtained a total of 1,700 chaos divine treasures. Then, they went to the ruins of the Chaos of Death and obtained another 170 units of chaos divine treasures. At this point, the number of chaos divine treasures in his hands had already reached 8,568 units. A smile appeared on Joe Marshall's face. Advancing to Grade 1 Supreme God territory required 10,000 units of chaos divine treasures. Now he was only short of 1,000 units. It seemed that after he sent his clone to take the chaos divine treasure from Lord of 10,000 Evils, he would have gathered all the chaos divine treasures. However, there was no joy on Joe Marshall's face. Chaos divine treasures could be obtained through many channels, so it was not difficult to resolve them. What was difficult to resolve now was the ultimate void crystal and the most ridiculous requirement to upgrade a Grade 1 Supreme God territory to conquer 10 beginner grade Master God tier kingdoms. That was 10 beginner grade Master God tier kingdoms. Moreover, it could not overlap with the 4 beginner grade Master God tier kingdoms needed to upgrade a high-level Master God tier kingdom. In other words, if he wanted to upgrade his territory to a Grade 1 Supreme God level territory and then upgrade the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom to a beginner grade Master God tier kingdom, he still needed to conquer a total of 12 beginner grade Master God tier kingdoms. This was even counting Linger's beginner grade Spiritual Medicine Master God tier kingdom and AUS Chaos beginner grade Master God tier kingdom. Otherwise, he would need to conquer 14 beginner-grade Master God tier kingdoms. Difficult. At this rate, the speed at which he upgraded his territory would greatly decrease. What to do? Zhou thought about this question again. He had no choice but to do so. He was about to meet the requirements of the Chaos Divine Treasure after all. Of the remaining conditions, he had the confidence to resolve the 10 units of Ultimate Void Crystals. This way, the only remaining condition was to conquer the 10 beginner-grade Master God tier kingdoms. Under such circumstances, he naturally wanted to complete all the advancement conditions as soon as possible to upgrade his territory. However, after thinking for a long time, he still couldn't think of a good solution. The Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos were developing at such a speed. What could he do? He couldn't expect every lord to be as abnormal as he and be able to quickly upgrade his territory to the level of a beginner-grade Master God tier kingdom. At this thought, Joe Marshall realized something. That was, he had encountered the same problem as before. The problem was that his competitors could no longer keep up with his pace of development. As a result, when he wanted to turn around and harvest them, they realized that these crops were not even worth harvesting. Joe Marshall scratched his head with a helpless expression. That's probably the only downside of going too fast. Right at that moment, a light suddenly appeared in his mind. Oh, yeah. Why don't you ask Bodhi Supreme what to do? If you want to do it, do it. He immediately took out the Bodhi Supreme. Yo! As soon as Bodhi Supreme came out, he teased, "Our common people's regal, the Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army, no, the Supreme Lord's 3rd Reserve Army, why do you have the time to look for me? It's been a long time since you've asked me questions." The corners of Zhou Marshall's mouth twitched. However, in the past few days, his main body had indeed not asked the Bodhi Supreme many questions. The main reason was that his main body had already reached a high enough level. Most of the questions in the myriad worlds could be answered by the main body with his own knowledge and the bloodline inheritance in his mind. He did not need the Bodhi Supreme's help at all. Therefore, the Bodhi Supreme rarely appeared in front of the main body in clones during this period of time. He ignored Bodhi Supreme's teasing and directly asked, "Bodhi Supreme, I have a question. It's about the beginner grade Master God Tier Kingdom, right?" Bodhi Supreme said lazily. "That's right." Zhou Marshall nodded. Currently, the Lord factions of the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos are developing too slowly. They can no longer satisfy my need to advance my territory. What do I do now? Tisk. Bodhi Supreme smiled and said, "This is also a kind of blissful distress. A chance to answer a common question, then, as a price. A chance to answer a normal question. So cheap?" Zhou Marshall said in surprise. "It wasn't a problem in the first place. You were just blinded." Bodhi Supreme said lazily, "I'm not a profiteer. I only ask for a price based on the difficulty of the problem." Blinded? Zhou Marshall fell into deep thought and asked curiously, "Then what is the solution?" "To the ultimate void great cosmos." Bodhi Supreme looked at Zhou Marshall as if he was looking at a fool. "Don't tell me you think that in the entire ultimate void great cosmos, only our universe walks the path of a lord? In the entire ultimate void great cosmos, there are many great cosmos that walk the path of a lord. Some of the great cosmoses in them even have lords with transcendent wills. You lack a beginner grade Master God Tier Kingdom? Then conquer these universes." Chapter 1707, The Existence of the Third Illusionary Legendary Tier Sage Seal. 1. The words woke him up from his dream. That's right. Why didn't he think of going to the ultimate void great cosmos to find another great cosmos that followed the path of a lord and complete the promotion goal of his territory by conquering the high-level territories of theirs? A blind spot? It's a blind spot. Zhou Marshall muttered to himself before an excited expression appeared on his face. If this path was smooth, forget about upgrading his territory to the Grade 1 Supreme God's territory. He would also upgrade his divine kingdom to the level of a high-level Master God Tier Kingdom. Even if it was a Supreme God level or even a Supreme Willpower level country, he had a chance of reaching it. Moreover, it was the kind that he did not have to worry about spending too much time. I've stayed in the Supreme Great Cosmos for too long, so my horizons are limited to the Supreme Great Cosmos. At most, I can expand the Crimson Great Cosmos. So much so that he didn't even think about going to other universes to find a target. Zhou Marshall sighed inwardly. However, it was precisely because he knew this reason that he did not blame his main body, Zhou. He only sighed. It was indeed better for people to go out more. If they did not broaden their horizons, even if the answer was right in front of them, they would be too narrow-minded and unable to see the full answer. Fortunately, he had the brain of the Bodhi Supreme in his hands. Otherwise, he would probably be confused by this difficult problem for a long time. If you encounter any problems in the future, you still have to ask the Bodhi Supreme more. Zhou Marshall reminded himself and his main body. Then, he began to think again. Even though the way to quickly advance territories and divine kingdoms was to find other alternate universes that had the path of other lords in the ultimate void great cosmos and complete the goal he needed by conquering the territories in them, but after thinking about it carefully, there were still a few difficulties that needed to be resolved to achieve this. If they did not resolve them, not to mention completing the goal, they might even lose themselves. First of all, the first problem was naturally the question of which great cosmos to conquer. The ultimate void great cosmos was boundless. It was truly a great cosmos with no boundaries. The great cosmos within it was almost endless because of this. Finding a suitable great cosmos for him to conquer from these great cosmoses was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. Fortunately, he had the Bodhi Supreme and there was a high chance that he could resolve this. There was a solution to this problem. Then, it was time for the second problem. That was how to integrate into other great cosmos and participate in the Lord contest with a suitable identity to quickly complete the promotion resources he needed. At the same time, he could not expose his identity. Otherwise, once a cosmic spy like him was discovered, the supreme willpower experts and even willpower experts of the enemy great cosmos would definitely personally deal with him after knowing that an outsider like him had actually plundered the resources of their great cosmos. Even though Zhou Wu knew that his main body in many avatars already had a certain level of ability to protect themselves even in the face of a supreme will realm, that was just self-preservation. If a Supreme Will Realm expert used his full strength, there was a high chance that his avatar, which was as strong as him, would still die on the spot. It was even to the extent that with the unique and strange methods of the other world's great cosmos, it might affect him. Zhou and his many clones didn't dare bet that such a thing wouldn't happen. Therefore, before they had to prepare a way to hide their identities entered other universes. He did not ask Bodhi Supreme. Instead, he thought about it first. He soon thought of a solution. This method was still very close and was in the hands of the main body. Isn't the best way to hide your identity the reality cube that the main body currently controls? The effect of the reality cube's obscure identity can even be hidden from the Crimson Overlord. The Void Emperor holds the reality cube and even dares to ignore the importance and protection of the Supreme Will to directly send a Supreme Will realm expert to assassinate him. Its ability to hide its identity and change reality information can definitely be considered top-notch. It shouldn't be a problem for it to hide the identity of the clone. Zhou Marshall thought. This matter would definitely be done by his clone, so there was nothing wrong with his idea with his main Bodhi's habit of being lazy. As for why the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord were used as examples, it was because even in the ultimate void great cosmos, other than the legendary Eternal Realm experts, the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord's strength could definitely be considered top-notch experts among the willpower experts. This could be seen from how the Supreme Will easily killed the patriarch of the ultimate void race, the Void Emperor. The ultimate void race had an overlord-like status in the ultimate void cosmos. Even he was easily destroyed by the Supreme Will. The Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord's strength could be said to be invincible at the same level. The reality cube could even hide from them. In other universes, it was most likely not a problem to hide the true identity of the main Bodhi's clone. He left his thoughts to his main body and did not think too much about it. He opened the warp gate of the shadow world and met up with the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom army led by Zhou Wen to continue attacking the other territories on the High Continent. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom now occupied 2/5 of the entire High Continent. Chapter 1708, The Existence of the Third Illusionary Legendary Tier Sage Seal. 2. According to the plans of the main body and clones, they planned to unify the entire High Continent in at most 3 days and become the true master of the High Continent. The High Continent was originally a reward given by the Supreme Will to him, the Supreme Lord's Fourth Reserve Army. It was comparable to the dusk battlefield of the God King Heaven Punishment, the river of time of the Spring and Autumn Dharma Lord, and the ultimate void battlefield of the Lord of 10,000 Evils. He didn't want to delay here for too long, lest the Supreme will feel that his strength had decreased. At the same time, in the common people's temple of the blazing sun divine kingdom, Zhou was closing his eyes and activating the doppelganger technique. The next second, he felt half of the origin power in his body quickly flowed out of his heart and gathered in his hand, forming a ball of 9-colored origin power. Then, the ball of light slowly condensed into a palm-sized Zhou. He jumped out of Zhou's hand. As he landed on the ground, he rapidly grew in size. By the time he landed on the ground, he was already the size of Zhou. Zhou 16 greets the main body. Zhou 16 smiled. I haven't named you yet, but you've named yourself. Zhou chuckled. With your terrible naming skills, what else could you have given it other than Zhou 16? I just helped you say it in advance. Zhou 16 pursed his lips. Zhou was speechless, but he didn't dwell on it. Go to the ultimate void battleground for me today. Zhou said, you have to be more careful. I have a feeling that you will encounter other gains on this trip. I understand. Zhou 16 nodded. The main Bodhi's various premonitions had been verified countless times, so he had no choice but to believe it. Then you go. Zhou waved his hand. Zhou 16 was about to leave when he suddenly heard Zhou say, wait. What's up? Zhou 16 was taken aback as he turned to look at him. Zhou's eyes lit up when he sensed Zhou Marshall's message. That's right. Why didn't he think of conquering their high-level lord country in the other universes of the ultimate void great cosmos to complete his goal of advancement? It was really as the Bodhi Supreme had said. He had stayed in the high continent for so long that he had not thought of it even though the answer was clearly right in front of him. He could not help but feel a little vexed. If he had thought of this earlier, he might have already become a high-level Divine Kingdom Lord faction 5 to 6 days ago. Sure enough, the old saying was right. People don't make money beyond their knowledge. Never mind. Don't worry about it. It's not too late to think about it. Zhou didn't mind. He turned to the curious Zhou 16 and said, after you return from the ultimate void battleground today, come and see me immediately. I have another task for you. Okay. Zhou 16 nodded happily and asked, are you alright now? Come on, let's go. You don't look like you want to stay. Zhou pretended to wave his hand in disdain. Zhou 16 shrugged and left with an indifferent expression. Zhou looked at Zhou 16 and said to himself, with a smile, let this fellow explore other alternate universes. It's an alternate universe. They're all undeveloped. His heart was burning. Zhou had a premonition. After his avatar developed the alternate universe, his territory's upgrade speed would definitely increase like a rocket. On the other side, after Zhou 16 left the Divine Kingdom, he directly opened a warp gate and descended from the shadow world into the ultimate void battleground. The moment he arrived at the ultimate void battleground, he felt something amiss. He narrowed his eyes slightly. On the surface, he did not show any expression, but in fact, his attention had already fallen on an item in the number 1 treasure vault. It was a sacred white incomplete seal formed by a large number of illusory lines. It was the illusionary legendary tier Sage seal. At this moment, it was trembling non-stop and looked like it was about to fly out. Seeing this, Zhou 16 pondered as he used his divine power to suppress the incomplete illusionary legendary tier Sage seal fragment. This illusionary legendary tier Sage seal had a total of 5 fragments. Due to fate, he already had 2 fragments. Originally, he didn't pay much attention to this thing. He mainly left it up to fate and didn't even investigate much. This thing was very difficult to investigate after all. Even the Bodhi Supreme did not know of its existence. He didn't expect that the third fragment of the illusionary legendary Tier Sage Seal would appear in front of him. That's right. With his control over the incomplete illusionary legendary Tier Sacred Seal, he could sense that the fragment of the illusionary legendary Tier Sacred Seal was shaking because it sensed that other fragments were nearby. God help me. Treasures come to you. A smile appeared on Zhou 16's face. He memorized the location of the treasure and did not immediately look for it. This was because someone had come to look for him. A blood-colored stream of light exuding an evil aura flew over from afar and quickly arrived in front of him. He smiled happily and said, "Big brother. As soon as I sensed your presence, I came over." The person who spoke was naturally the Lord of 10,000 Evils. Zhou 16 nodded with a smile. "Let's go. Let's go to dinner. I can prepare a lot of delicacies, each of which will be unforgettable for you. Brother, do you know the sacred Lord of Food and Sleep? He is the expert who used delicious food as his nomological path and became a supreme god all the way. For today's banquet, I specially invited that person over and even brought out a lot of good ingredients to let big brother and little brother eat and drink to their heart's content." The Lord of 10,000 Evils excitedly wanted to drag Zhou 16 to the banquet. He had prepared a lot for today's banquet. It wasn't just the delicacies. Fine wine, beautiful women, beautiful music, and beautiful scenery. He had almost prepared everything as long as it could be thought about. Wait a minute. Zhou 16 helplessly organized him. This guy. He and the other party had only met for a few days. It couldn't be that bad, right? However, he didn't say it out loud. Instead, let me meet the Supreme Will first. Lord of 10,000 Evils was stunned. Then, he slapped his head. I almost forgot the rules. Big brother is right. It's time to meet the Supreme Will. Let's go, big brother. Well, go together. The Lord Supreme will probably summon me too. As for the banquet, it won't be too late to start it later. The Lord of 10,000 Evils hurriedly said. Zhou 16 nodded and flew away with the Lord of 10,000 Evils. During the flight, the Lord of 10,000 Evils handed a world ring to Zhou 16. Big brother, these are the ultimate void crystal and chaos divine treasure you wanted. He said. Zhou 16 received it and sent his willpower into it. Then, he saw that there were a total of 8,132 units of chaos divine treasures and 66 units of ultimate void crystals in this world rings. When Zhou 16 saw this, he was very satisfied. This time, the number of chaos divine treasures in the main Buddha's hands had already reached 16,700 units, far exceeding the requirements to advance to a Grade 1 Supreme God territory. As for the ultimate void divine crystals, he was still short of 12 units including the ones that his main body already had. However, Zhou 14 and Zhou 15 should be able to find the missing ultimate void crystal. When the time came, the requirements to advance to Grade 1 Supreme God territory were all met. Big brother's gift to you. Catch. Zhou 16 took out a world ring and threw it to the Lord of 10,000 Evils. The Lord of 10,000 Evils took it and curiously let the power of will enter. Then, he saw that there were actually 50,000 Supreme Divine Artifacts, 10 million Master God Tier Divine Artifacts, and 1,000,000 Grade 1 Supreme God Divine Crystals in this world rings. The Lord of 10,000 Evils' hand trembled and he almost threw the world ring away. Big brother. The Lord of 10,000 Evils was still in shock as he smiled bitterly, I'm just running around. Big brother, you've given me too much. So much so that I feel like I'm burning. Take it. Zhou 16 shook his head nonchalantly. All you need to know is that your brother won't be able to use all these things. Take it as sharing this pain for me. The corners of the Lord of 10,000 Evil's mouth twitched a few times. Big brother is really getting better at showing off. However, he was really awesome, so the Lord of 10,000 Evils couldn't feel disgusted. He only felt that his big brother was getting more and more awesome. He had a feeling that he would never catch up to this brother of his. Chapter 1709, The Shock of the Supreme Will. Gift. 1. It was just some supreme divine artifacts, Master God tier divine artifacts, and divine crystals. His main body and clones were nothing to him. The resources given to the Lord of 10,000 Evils were far inferior to the daily war income of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Therefore, Zhou 16 naturally did not mind. Furthermore, the Lord of 10,000 Evils was now close to him, and might become his ally or even subordinate in the future. If he gave some resources at this time to allow his strength and power to quickly increase, it would be beneficial to his present and future. The two deities chatted along the way and teleported. They soon arrived at the location of the Supreme Will's avatar. The Supreme Will avatar was currently in the sacred region of the original Ultimate Void race, watching the Supreme Army and the Ultimate Void race's army fight below. When Zhou 16 saw this, he looked over curiously. Then, he was secretly shocked. The direct descendant army of the Supreme Will, the Supreme Army, was indeed powerful. Each of them could completely suppress the God Spirit soldiers of the Ultimate Void race. Ordinary God Spirits suppressed Ultimate Void True God tiers, and True God tiers suppressed Ultimate Void Master God tiers. They could be seen everywhere on the battlefield. Even a Master God tier could suppress or even kill the Supreme God of the Ultimate Void race with the advantage of numbers and military formations. Their individual combat ability and joint combat ability completely crushed top Supreme Soldier types like the Supreme God Realm Soldiers and the Supreme Holy Mage God under Zhou. Furthermore, their combat style was experienced and decisive. They were clearly all experienced warriors. Is this a Supreme Soldier type? Or a Transcendent Soldier type? Zhou 16 was curious and envious. He did not know how the Supreme Soldier types under him would be promoted to Supreme Soldier types in the future. He had yet to obtain any news regarding this. Sometimes, the main body would even wonder if there was a training method for Supreme Soldier types in the Supreme Great Cosmos. This was because among the Supreme Forces of Will that he knew, there were no subordinates of Supreme Soldier types. On the other hand, the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord had one of the Transcendent Soldier types, the Supreme Legion and the Crimson Overlord. Speaking of which, at this moment, on the battlefield, the Supreme Army relied on their overwhelming strength to easily suppress and kill the larger Ultimate Void Race army. The Ultimate Void Race's God Spirit army was decreasing at a visible speed. Clearly, it would be completely destroyed soon. As for the God Spirits of the Supreme Army, there had not been any obvious casualties so far. Even if a God Spirit died, they would quickly revive with their own methods or the help of other God Spirits in a short period of time and then return to the battlefield to continue fighting. Zhou 16 clicked his tongue in wonder. Even though he knew how his main body revived soldiers, it was definitely not unique to him in the myriad worlds. However, the Supreme Army was really the first army faction he had seen that had the ability to revive on a large scale. He was not surprised. It would be strange if an army force of this level did not have the ability to revive. Greetings, Lord Supreme Will. Zhou 16 and the Lord of 10,000 Evils said respectfully after regaining their senses. The Supreme Will nodded. When his gaze landed on Zhou 16, a smile appeared on his face. The main body of the common people's regal is too careful. The ultimate void battlefield has already completely returned to our hands. Why did you still send your clone? In the reincarnation sacred palace, Zhou Zhou stood up from the Dao comprehension futon with a bitter smile and said respectfully, I just think that there's nothing wrong with being careful. Furthermore, what I want to do the most now is to raise my cultivation realm to the level of the Supreme Will realm. This way, I can truly have the ability to protect myself, be it in the two universes or the ultimate void great cosmos. In addition, I'm already used to sending clones to do things, so I sent a clone over. The Supreme Will stood above the sanctuary of the ultimate void battleground. He smiled and nodded from an unknown distance. Alright, you're right. The Supreme God realm is indeed very low. The sooner you advance to the Supreme Will realm, the sooner I can arrange more important missions for you. Yes, Supreme Will. Zhou Zhou nodded slightly. The Supreme Will turned around and said, the outcome of the ultimate void battlefield has been decided. From now on, your order will rise by 1. From now on, you will be the third reserve army of the Supreme Lord. The Lord of 10,000 evils, your order has to be lowered by 1. From today onwards, you are the Supreme Lord's fourth reserve army. However, common people's regal, if you slack off in the future or fall behind the Lord of 10,000 evils, you don't need me to do it myself. Your declining luck will automatically make you fall back to the Supreme Lord's fourth reserve army. Lord of 10,000 evils, don't be discouraged. As long as you maintain your desire to improve at all times and strive to surpass the common people's regal, the position of the third reserve army Supreme Lord will still be yours. Yes, Supreme Will. Zhou 16 smiled. The Lord of 10,000 evils also responded very respectfully, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. Surpassing the common people's regal. He knew best how shocking the progress of the common people's regal was as a lord who had worked with the common people's regal for a period of time. Thinking back, when the common people's regal first came to the ultimate void battleground, he did not even have a supreme god under him. It had only been a few days, but there were already hundreds of supreme gods under him. His own strength had already surpassed the Lord of 10,000 evils. The Lord of 10,000 evils really did not dare to hope that he could surpass the other party's improvement speed. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review that you're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.